Hey folks, welcome to episode 409 of the Team House. I'm Jack Murphy here with today's guest, Ryan O'Leary. Ryan is a American military veteran, served in the National Guard, deploying to Afghanistan and Iraq, and then has lived the life of, maybe we can call you a professional adventurer, Ryan, serving with the Peshmerga, the PAK, some of the Kurdish groups over in northern Iraq or Kurdistan. And then spent another curious journey, took him to Ukraine, where he's been ever since. So Ryan has lived the life, I think. It's pretty incredible. And we really appreciate you joining us and hearing about these varied experiences that you've had.
Yeah, hey, I'm glad to be here, honestly. I don't think, like, the war in Ukraine, because it's on, like, its fourth year, it doesn't always get, like, the notice it should. And I don't think people really understand, like, the new drone warfare that's going on here.
Yep.
I think some countries like Israel are experiencing it now with Hezbollah, and then you're seeing it pop up in Africa and it also popped up in Syria. So I think there's a lot of misunderstandings with what drone warfare entails.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward to getting into that with you a bit. But I want to start off sort of at the beginning. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself, about where you came from, and why you joined the military.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Iowa, like small town in Iowa. Joined the Iowa Army National Guard at 17. Went to basic training, AIT, all that good stuff for infantry. The reason I joined is I had, like, my grandfathers were in the military. I had some uncles in the military, and, like, it's not really that way anymore. But, like, growing up, I'm 39 years old. So, like, growing up, we still had this, like, somewhat of a patriotic duty. A lot of my classmates from high school joined. I don't think you see that much anymore, sadly. But I joined because, like, like, you should defend your country if you're going to vote, and if you're going to, participate. You should participate with what's going on around you, whether it's politically or defending the nation. So I think everyone should do it, to be honest.
And so you went into the Army National Guard.
Yep. So originally I was going to go to college, and then I didn't really go to college. I did like 2 years of college. I never really finished a bachelor's or anything. But, like, the Guard at the time was like, hey, we didn't have a sign-on bonus, but they had the GI Bill. And, like, back then, college was expensive, but it wasn't as expensive now. So I was like, oh, I'll go, do the 1 weekend a month. And then when I graduate high school, I'll go to college. I graduated high school, didn't go to college, but.
And what year was that you signed up initially?
So I signed up, so I completed basic training in AIT November of 2004.
Wow. Okay. And where was the first place that they deployed you with the National Guard?
So the first place for the National Guard, so actually when we were basic training, there was some other guys from Iowa. They got pulled directly after AIT and deployed to Iraq. It was the 133rd. I did not go with the first group. I deployed in 2007. We were based out of Camp Victory Slayer area. Didn't do anything like remotely, exciting. It was mainly FOB security, and, like, making sure the Iraqi army and police don't shoot at each other type deal. Your typical
Right.
deployment for most people.
Yeah.
It was boring. It was, like, I don't know. Like, I think it was disheartening for me, honestly. So, like,
It
because,
wasn't
like,
what you were looking for.
yeah, basically.
And you did a couple more pumps with the National Guard, though, right?
Yeah, so 2010 to 11, we deployed to Afghanistan. We were in RC Pactia, which there it was more of your infantry style fighting, your foot patrols, presence patrols. We did some good operations, and, like, it was just more of, like, your action oriented. It was less like there was still, like, the hearts and mind bullshit that you had, but because the Taliban were more willing to, like, toe up against you,
Yeah.
there was still quite a bit of fighting. At least at that time frame, like 2009, 10, and 11, there was still some pretty good fighting going on. So we actually got to do, like, an infantry job versus, like, state, like, basically, like, police, just say you're there type deal.
So now you're kind of experiencing what you had hoped for I take it.
Yeah. Like, I mean, because, like, again, we had like actual direct firefights. Actually, our first day in country, we got in a fucking firefight. So we landed at Fob Gardez, and we did the right seat, left seat with the unit. I think it was a unit out of I think we replaced a guard unit out of New York, I believe, actually. But literally, we went from Gardez up to another, like to an AFCOP called Don Patan. And in the middle of that, there's, was it Adikel? Something Kel. It's like a village, and like we just got lit the fuck up. It was a good first experience for people, put it that way. We had one vehicle get hit with RPGs. We had one guy injure his hand. Luckily, nobody was killed or like severely injured. But like from that point on, it was like, this is real. Let's go.
So were you guys doing raids, or were you kind of like going out there, like kind of movement to contact, like let's find the enemy and mix it up?
So actually, I was assigned to a PSD group that was supposed to be bringing our brigade commander around. But on that, like he was with us on that first, main operation. So after that, like he used, the air to move around more than he did on the ground. We still did some other operations with him to bring him to some like more closer areas to Fob Gardez. But it was pretty much like, hey, we don't need PSD anymore. What do you guys want to do? And so we ended up just doing like EOD escort, presence patrol. Like we would drive down routes and be like, routes clear. And like we just basically were like the hey, we need somebody to go clear a route before engineers go down it type deal. And like, just like go out and see what happens type deal. It was like, I enjoyed it. I think some of our guys enjoyed it less than me because like we got put in some high risk situations. We drove down a black route a few times that some of the guys weren't very kosher with. One of them I planned, but like that was just young, dumb me. But like it was just more infantry oriented. So like it was just, we had decent morale the whole time. Our unit itself didn't take casualties. Some of our sister companies did. We had one guy get shot in the nuts. Otherwise, a majority of it, we were able to like escape unharmed for most of our, contacts.
Are there any operations from that time frame that kind of stand out in your mind?
I mean, not like if you would have asked me that before my adventures after Afghanistan, probably. But like honestly, like looking back, like the only thing that really stands out is we went up to Alpha Company was in Don Patan, which was in the northeast near the Afghan-Pak border. Like they were sandwiched right on the border. And we got, for some reason, we had to bring some Air Force guys up there. Anyway, we let them lead the convoy because they wanted to do it for some reason. They ended up running over a donkey in a village and like absolutely pissed off like the whole area. That was like the only like thing that it was like the funniest thing that I can remember from like Afghanistan as far as that goes. But like combat wise, like looking back at the combat now, everything there was like, you're getting shot at for the first time and like it's like, oh, this is intense. And then I come to Ukraine, and then I worked with after that I went with the Kurds, and we did operations in like Bashika, Kirkuk, and I'm like, man, Afghanistan was nothing. And then even Ukraine now, it's like Ukraine, like everything previous to Ukraine, I'm just like, it was nothing. It was like little league compared to what you see here.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I are fairly close to the same age. I'm like 3 years older than you. I mean, so and you've been in it, pretty consistently, and you have gotten to see warfare change and evolve in some pretty dramatic ways. I feel like from when you and I were 18 to today.
Yeah, I mean, like, so when I was in Iraq, so after Afghanistan, I did 3 more years in the Guard. In 2014, I actually went AWOL from the National Guard and just got a plane ticket. I got honorable discharge and all that, but I basically bought a one-way plane ticket to Erbil, landed in Erbil, met up with some of the Kurdish guys who were part of like the security detail in 0708 that I knew. And basically they were like, what the fuck are you doing? I was like, let's go. Like, this is right as ISIS was crossing over into Iraq. I think they had just gotten to the Yazidis, where the Yazidis
Yes.
were trapped. I think I got to Iraq. I got to the Kurdistan region, I think, like right as they were approaching the Makmur-Guer front line. And like the guys were like, I think they honestly didn't think I was going to actually come when I said, hey, I'm coming in, landing. I got to the airport. I had to borrow a local cell phone to get a hold of them. And they're like, what in the fuck are you doing? And I was like, let's go. Like, ready to rock. Like, let's see what happens.
And at that time, Ryan, like you would have been one of the kind of like few foreigners, trying to join up at that time. It exploded down the line, but kind of like early 2014, I think we're talking about here. You must have been one of the first guys.
I think it was like March or April. Might have been mid-April or I got there, but yeah, like I was one of the first ones. I didn't do the Syria thing. I think there was some guys that crossed over from Turkey into Syria before I had gotten to that region and were like, doing some operations. I think Jordan Matson might have beat me there, and then a couple other guys. But as far as like Iraq goes, I don't think there was too many people, at least veterans, that were wanting to, back up whatever the Iraqi government or even get back involved in that type of conflict. So, and I think honestly, a lot of Americans didn't think, ISIS was going to be a problem for the Iraqis, but they literally melted away, from everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember when they were closing in on Erbil, that's when we started doing airstrikes. Fear that we're going to lose, that city would have been disastrous.
So I was I'm assuming you've been to Erbil?
Yeah.
So I was in Inkawa, so like the Christian neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah.
From our like 3-story building, we could literally see the airstrikes. Like people don't understand how close they got to the Kurdish lines, because before ISIS, the Iraqis controlled a lot of that area, and then like the Kurdish part was actually much smaller than it is today. And like it got really large during the occupation of ISIS,
Yes,
of parts of Iraq. But like, yeah, we could literally see the strikes happening outside of Erbil. Like they got within, I think like within 10 kilometers, if not closer at one point. But like when I got there, it was like every civilian has an AK, and probably in Iraq, but like especially in Kurdistan, like every household for the most part has either an AK or something in their house. And like those first early days, you just have people drive up to the front line and like fight for an hour or two, then go home. And nobody like, who was that? And everyone's like, oh, it's, so-and-so from whatever district. They'll be back tomorrow. And it's like, okay. Like they just come when they're off work.
It's awesome.
Like the Kurds are just like, I love the Kurds, man. Like they're just amazing.
What was it like for you as, you're still a pretty young guy coming from Iowa, some military experience in the Guard. But what was sort of the process of like you joining a foreign military or a foreign militia and signing up with the Pesh?
So, man, like there really wasn't like a process. It was basically like, hey, I'm here to fight. I got in the vehicle with the English-speaking Kurds. They drove me to their commander over at like the Guer front, and he was like, "What the fuck?" And he's like, "Oh, he wants to fight." They explained it in Kurdish, and like at this point, I knew like zero Kurdish. It took me a while to pick it up, but like it was basically like, "Okay, here you're with these guys. Follow them around and shoot whoever drives at you," type deal. Because at that point, like ISIS was still trying to push. So they had VBIDs, but they were still trying to push more so as like, straight infantry. They weren't trying to like suicide bomb everything like what happened later on. They were literally still trying to do like maneuver, not really maneuver warfare, but like
probing.
Very basic. Yeah. They were probing frontline areas. In some cases they'd get through and then they get pushed back a little bit. Honestly, I think without the air support, it could have been a lot worse. I think it would have been, they would have got into the city, but like I think it could have turned into a really nasty city fight, because Erbil is a pretty big city, and I don't think people realize that. It's not like 100,000 people. It's quite large. It's compact. It's very, very dense.
And after you signed up, so to speak, or they just gave you the salute, welcome to the team, where did they send you?
So I bounced around from front lines. Honestly, I wasn't stuck in one unit. I worked over at the Guerre-Makmur front. And then when we started pushing ISIS back, I ended up over in Bashika. So a lot of people don't realize this. When ISIS got close to Erbil, you had Iranian Kurdish groups like Party Azadi Kurdistan, PAK, PDKI, both sides, because at that point they were split in two. Kamala, Zezmani Khabat, and a bunch of these other Iranian groups moved their troops in to help defend the Iraqi part. So like I bounced around between like Iraqi Peshmerga, Iranian Peshmerga, basically wherever the guys were going that day is where I went. It was pretty fluid for like the first 3 or 4 months. Once the actual Iraqi Kurdish Peshmerga, like their actual army, was able to like solidify front lines and build those berms up, then it was more of like, okay, here's your sector, you're going to stay here. And like we predominantly fought around Bashika, which is like near the Yazidi area out west. And then I also spent about 9 months in Kirkuk. Kirkuk was like 2016, 2017. I participated in like the 4-day civil war near Purdy, Kirkuk area with Hashid and, the Iraqi Kurds.
Tell us about that. How did that happen?
So we woke up one morning with our general. It was when I was with Party Azadi Kurdistan. The commander was Hussein Yazdan Hana. He was basically like, get ready, the Iraqis are coming. And I was like, what in the fuck? Like, like you wake up, it was like 7 in the morning. Like, hey, the Iraqis are driving at us. Like, we're going to fall back from this position and get to a more, stable area. Because at that point, so we were southwest of Kirkuk at that point. And Kirkuk, the lines had already fallen, like the PUK abandoned positions supposedly first, but like I think it was just total confusion. There was fighting in the city. So we actually got in our vehicles, pulled back to a village called Purdy, which sat on like a little bit of a higher elevation, and basically dug in there and just waited. And it was chaos, to be honest. Like there wasn't really good command and control. The Kurds had their artillery in like really dumb positions, so they were like trying to move their artillery around. And then I think once they took control of Kirkuk, we went from Purdy over to a town called Dibis, which is like a kilometer away from Purdy. And they had built berms for us. We put armor behind them. And basically it was like, we just got told to hold the line, don't move. Like, this is our last position. There's nothing behind it. Don't give in. And like the first day it was pretty quiet. The Hashid group tried to drive a Humvee down the road actually. And we ended up hitting it with a Chinese cornet. What the hell's the name of it? A C8 or CH8 or whatever it is. It looks just like a cornet, like ATGM missile. Blew the fuck out of it in the middle of the road. And that was like the end of combat for the day. In the morning when we were drinking tea, every morning in Iraq you have to have tea before you can go to war. Tea, cigarette, whatever, chai. So we're sitting there behind the berm at like 6 or 7 a.m. drinking tea, and all of a sudden you see a boom. So what we didn't realize is overnight the Iraq army had brought up armor. So your M1 Abrams and basically whatever they had, T-72s or whatever. So they started smashing the fuck out of us with tanks. And that was like my first experience getting shot at by a tank, to be quite honest. And like, that's like the only thing in a movie that's pretty accurate when it comes to explosions. Like you hear the initial boom from the gun going off, but you don't hear it whistling through the air. It's just boom and then boom. Like it's really quick. And like it hit a dude in the arm. So like I was like trying to bandage, like we didn't have tourniquets. We had like our balaclava. So like I take my balaclava off, I wrap this guy's arm up, try to tighten it so it doesn't bleed everywhere. Throw in a vehicle, and like we had pulled back a little bit, and the Peshmerga armor came forward, and so there was like a temporary tank battle where nobody hit anyone. It was pretty shitty. Like Ukrainians would fire, or not Ukrainians, but the Peshmerga would fire, then the Iraqis would fire, and like they would hit stuff around it, but nobody would hit the armor really. It was a shit show. But at one point, one of the Peshmerga units, I think it was from the Black Tigers, one of Barzani's more elite groups, came up with another ATGM and actually managed to hit one of the Abrams tanks. And at that point, they pulled the tanks back. Because, like, the Iraqis, when it comes to tank warfare, the Iraqis just park the fucking tanks and, like, they don't move. They just sit there and just keep lobbing rounds. So once we hit one, they were like, oh, fuck, they can, hit our tanks. So they pulled them back. The one that got hit with the ATGM basically burnt up out there. And I think there's photos online of it.
That's wild.
But after that, we went back to the actual frontline berm. I ran into another American there, actually. There was a journalist that showed up, Nolan Peterson. It was like, what in the like, why are you at the front line? We're getting, like, smashed with everything. He was like, I'm here to record it. I was like, okay, man, have fun. Later on, I found out he's like a veteran, former Army, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, name sounds vaguely familiar.
But yeah, like, we held that for it was probably like 5 or 6 days of fighting. The Kurds would push forward into like some fields that had crops, and they would set up ambushes on like the Hashid members or whatever, trying to drive down the road. Like, the Iraqis didn't try to flank. They literally just kept trying to drive down the cement road over and over again, like a bunch of fucking idiots. So, the Kurds would move RPG teams out into these like cornfields or whatever it was, and they just sit there and wait for them to drive the vehicle past. I ran a 120 mortar system for a while, and we were close enough that, like, I was on like a little hilltop. It was just direct lay. Like, we didn't have a fucking sight on the side or anything. It was literally like they gave out a distance, and then we would guess how many cheese rounds or whatever they call it, put on it, drop it in, and be like, oh shit, we just went like 6 kilometers too far, come back. But like, we ended up hitting a few of them. Yeah, like the Civil War thing was fucking hectic. But like, that was like the first, dealing with armor. Like, we had the ISIS, suicide vehicles, but like, that was the first time I've ever been shot at by a tank, which was interesting, I'd say.
As America turns 250 this year, we want to help good ranchers take a moment to remember the people who helped build it. Not the ones in the history books, but the ones who woke up before the sun, season after season, without seeking any sort of applause. And those people are America's ranchers. For over 250 years, ranchers have worked tirelessly to feed America through every kind of storm. Through the droughts, wars, recessions, pandemics, changing markets, changing politics, they never stopped. That's the kind of legacy Good Ranchers was built on. Unlike others, Good Ranchers is a meat company that's 100% committed to America, not just in words, but in practice. Every cut they offer is raised on local American farms and ranches. From the pasture to the final seal on every box, their entire packaging and fulfillment process takes place right here in America. And if you ever have any questions, their customer support team is in-house too. And to top it all off, with every order placed, Good Ranchers donates a portion of the profits to various veterans organizations. So as we head into a year meant to celebrate American culture, heritage, and the people who shaped it, Good Ranchers stands right at the heart of that story. I'm actually a Good Ranchers subscriber myself, and I love how easy it is to manage my orders. When life gets busy or I'm traveling, I can pause or move my order in just a few clicks. It's simple, flexible, and actually built around your entire schedule. To support a company that honors America's past, present, and future, visit goodranchers.com today. When you start your plan, you'll get to pick a free meat that will be included in every order for life, and you'll get $25 off your first order using our exclusive promo code HOUSE. That's HOUSE, H-O-U-S-E, for $25 off your first order, just to try Good Ranchers out, because they're that confident you'll love it. GoodRanchers.com, American meat delivered. Guys, if your lady or your fella or that person that sends you an eggplant emoji at 2 a.m. is ready for better sex, then you should be too. That's where BlueChew comes in. They have been on a mission for years to help get you bricked up, build your confidence, and help you actually perform in the bedroom. Their new arousal-boosting formula, BlueChew Gold, is helping millions of men have better sex in 2026. While most ED meds focus only on blood flow, BlueChew Gold goes further by combining 2 ingredients for blood flow with 2 ingredients for mental arousal and connection. So you're not just physically ready, you're actually in the mood. This type of innovation is why BlueChew Gold is the #1 brand in erectile function. Don't let your mind get in the way of a good time. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Right now, when you buy 2 months of BlueChew Gold, you get a third for free with the promo code HOUSECALL. That's promo code HOUSECALL. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring this podcast. Do you want to talk a little bit about like why this civil war is happening? Because if I recall correctly, Kirkuk has kind of a complicated history that it used to be a Kurdish city. Saddam Hussein moved the Kurds out and moved Arabs in to try to do a demographic replacement there. And then ISIS comes and takes over Kirkuk. The Kurds come and take it back. And now there's this conflict between the Kurds and the Iraqis about who owns the city.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize Kirkuk is a mix. So I'm going to piss off some people, but like Kirkuk historically in modern times was Kurdish. There's like Turkmen roots in that too.
Yeah,
but like that's a long time ago. That's like pre-Ba'athist era, like a long, long time ago. But there's like Turkmen there, there's Chaldean, there's Kurdish, there's Arab. And when Saddam took over Iraq and when the Kurds started uprising and stuff, they took back Kirkuk from the Kurdish, and basically like that's the oil hub area. So whoever controls it controls a lot of the oil and like a lot of the main routes. So there's this contentious history here where the Kurds are like, it's ours, the Iraqi government's like, it's theirs. And when ISIS came in, the Iraq army just disappeared overnight. Like it just vanished. The Iraqi police vanished, everyone vanished for security. So like when the Kurds took back Kirkuk, for them, it was like, hey, you guys abandoned this area. This is our territory now. And so in 2017, what led up to the civil war is the Kurds were like, you know what? We've dealt with the Iraq government long enough. It's not working. Let's declare independence. They held a referendum, and it got like 85% or 80 to 90%, I think, was like, yes, let's leave Iraq. The U.S. the U.S. was, I think, mainly against it publicly, but like, I don't think they were really trying behind the scenes to pressure the Kurds to not do it type deal. I think Turkey was like, absolutely not. You're not going to be able to do this type deal, predominantly because of their security situation with the PKK and all of that. So after the referendum, the Kurds were like, okay, we're going to set a timeline of like 12 months or 2 years, and then we're getting full independence. Like we're not dealing with Iraq anymore. Our own trade, we'll do everything. And obviously that pissed off the Iraq government, and they went after Kirkuk. They say it was to like bring about like equality or whatever, but it was about who controlled the oil at Kirkuk, because you have large oil fields and refineries and everything around Kirkuk. And like, it was a matter of if the Kurds were able to solidify a hold over this, there's their economy. They'll have money. If they have money, they can build up their defense forces properly. And then obviously Iran doesn't want to see a stronger Kurdish group either. So Iran actually was probably like one of the main facilitators in making sure that didn't happen. I think Turkey was upset with it, but like, I don't think they were physically, getting involved. Like Iranians were like helping out during the assault on Kirkuk. Like there's literally photos of the IRGC in Kirkuk. So it was like directly there.
Did you ever run across a couple guys with a Pesh named Kurt and Joey, both Americans?
I'm terrible with names. Like I ran across a few foreigners, but like by my second year, I knew enough Kurdish that I could get around fairly easily. So I didn't really deal with foreigners. Like now in Ukraine, I've led foreigners for a while, but like at that point in time, I just was sticking around with the Kurds. Didn't like foreigners always bring drama.
You're right. I just bring it up. I like those two guys. I met them over there in 2015, I believe, in the fighting around outside of Kirkuk when they were pushing ISIS further out. And I was out there as a journalist at the time. And I remember one of those dudes telling me about being down in Kirkuk somewhere, and he got out of his Humvee to go take a piss, and he looks over at one of the Kurds, and he's actually this guy with a beard and has this like green headband, and he's like, "Hey man, is like the front line over this way and that way?" And the guy just looks at him with like crazy eyes, like, and there's that Iranian.
Yeah, like, man, we did a lot of dumb shit during the ISIS fighting. We did good that we helped defeat ISIS, but we also helped bolster Hashabi and the other PMUs, because like we were handed, man, like I was at the Bashika front line, and this was with Iranian Kurdish groups. And this happened in Kirkuk too. This happened at Makmur, but you'd have soft units show up. They'd hand out the weaponry. They wouldn't ask who you are. Like we got handed stuff by some European countries, and I was like, you're giving that to like Iranian Kurdish, like for lack of a better word, militant groups. Like we're gonna take this when we're done fighting here, and we're gonna go fuck up the Iranians with it. And like they're like not our problem. It's for the Iraqi Kurds. I was like, whatever. Like they couldn't differentiate what group was what. It was like, if you're Kurdish, you're Kurdish.
Right.
And in Kirkuk, they did the same. Like if you look at some of the Kirkuk videos after the Kurds lost it, you have Hashabi, inside of the Abrams tanks. You have them inside of Western tech, and like the agreement was like, hey, Hashabi's not going to run this stuff. They're not supposed to use the U.S. stuff or whatever. And in reality, the PMU was like one of the main donors of U.S. fucking aid, to be quite honest. Like it was extremely mismanaged. Like it was so like so I was over near Mosul for a little bit, and like you had PMU guys running decked out M4s, and like if you ask them like, where'd you get it? They're like, oh, the Americans brought it. And it's like, what the fuck, guy? Like so bad. Like I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a group of Iranian engineers at one point hammering away at Abrams tank to figure out what made it tick, and taking photos of whatever else we sent it.
Let's talk a little bit about how you became associated with the Iranian Kurds, because this is a really interesting thing. Again, not many Americans had the experience that you had working with them.
Yeah, like honestly, it was initially by accident. I was on a front line, and like these guys showed up with different uniforms, because like a lot of the Iranian Kurdish groups wear the traditional uniform, like the Kurdish one with the fancy wrap and everything. Yep. And then they wear like a chest rig. They don't wear body armor. They have all their Kurdish clothes on, their sweet ass balaclava on their head, sometimes wrapped around their face. I was like, who the fuck are these guys? And they're like, oh, we're PDKI. And I was like, who the fuck is PDKI? I've never heard of you. And they're like, we're from Iran. And I was like, what in the fuck? They're like, oh, we're from the good part of Iran. And I was like, okay. And they're like, yeah, we're fighting the ISIS, and then we're going to bring everything back and fight Iran. I was like, okay, this is cool. And all this was happening. I met those guys like end of 2014, I think. And I think I actually met the leadership of the PDKI in December or November 2014. But like that was when Obama's nuclear deal was going on too. And like you could see it on the front line when like Makmur at one point you had, Iraqi forces there with Kurds. There was like a huge animosity because like there's Iranians intermixed with the Iraqis, and like there was just a huge threat level. And they're like, hey, do you want to come fight Iran? And I was like, let's go. Like I was like, I'm already here, so like I can help train you guys to fight the Iranians, and I'll help fight ISIS when I can. So because they were on the front lines fighting ISIS, like we just had a training ground right there, so teaching them small unit tactics and stuff. It was just the next step, I guess, into the adventure. And like honestly, like the Iranians that I met, so like Iranian Kurdish groups also recruit non-Kurds, and I don't think people understand that. Like we had guys from Tehran, like actual Persians. We had Avazi Arabs. They don't care, like it's largely Kurdish, but they don't care what your ethnicity is, as long as you can either speak Farsi or Kurdish, and you politically align with whatever their ideology, whether it is like liberalism or like there's some communist parties, but like, like they're like center left. I don't know if I'd call them social. Like they call themselves socialists, but like because their culture is still conservative, it's more of like they're more of like barely democratic, honestly,
Yeah,
outside of their
yeah.
economic policy. But like, yeah, I worked with them. They were nice people. I was like, okay, let's continue this. They were extremely well armed at the time, especially Party Azadi Kurdistan. So I fought with them for a long time. In 2016, actually, I ended up spending a year in the Kandil Mountains with KDPI, and like that was pretty brutal. It was cold, like through the winter in a mountain range. Like they have caves and stuff that they use, but like it's not fun. But I think after that, I sort of got some respect with them, and like more doors opened up with what they were doing inside of Iran. I got to see more of a larger picture on like what they were actually trying to achieve. So like, yeah, I worked with them on and off for the whole time, honestly.
What was that they were trying to achieve?
So a lot of people say they're trying to separate from Iran, but they're not. When I got there, so previously in the early 2010s, so like 1980, actually from the end of World War II up to like the 1990s and early 2000s, they wanted a separate Iran, like an independent or a separate Kurdistan, independent Kurdistan, all for, Iraqi Kurdistan, Iranian Kurdistan, Turkey, Syria. They believed in like this unified Kurdish state. And they thought that they had to start by getting the largest part from Iran. So like they were traditionally a separatist group. A lot of them were traditionally Marxist, Leninist, and all that, because during World War II, the Soviets actually provided them a lot of weaponry before they fucked them over after the Republic of Mahabad fell, because they did declare independence in 1948, I think, and it was called the Republic of Mahabad. I might be off; it might be 46. But they had like a temporary independence, and then the Soviet Union basically left them out to hang, and it didn't work out well for them. Qazi Muhammad was hanged, and a bunch of their other like not like spiritual leaders in regards to religion, but like their spiritual ideology as far as like independence was ruined, or at least pushed back into the shadows. But in the early 2000s, after we invaded Iraq, they moved into like a more of like we're not socialist, but we want limited capitalism. We want freedom of all ethnicities. Like they went to like a federalist society
Hmm.
type ideology where like the Kurdish area has their own sovereignty, but we still answer to the federal government. The Arab minority in the south below us has their own sovereignty, and you still have a federal government. Like almost, I don't want to say similar to the U.S. because it's not quite that way, but it was like each minority gets their own, governance, but then they have a federal government that they answer to. Like what was supposed to be in Iraq.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of like I think part of that ideological change was kind of abandoning the idea of an independent Kurdistan or as a state, and more of this idea that there were these going to be these different cantons that were kind of loosely associated with one another, running from Iran, northern Iraq, and into Syria and maybe Turkey. That was sort of like their idea of democratic confederalism.
Yeah, so like the Syrian Kurds, Rojava, and the Rojavalis, they have a lot of similarities. Like they don't do the Apoism stuff on the Iranian side outside of PJAC, but like their ideology of like, hey, if you're a minority, you run your own area, and then there's like your councils local that answer to like a regional or federal level. It's very similar. It's just how everything's worded. Even in like Iraqi Kurdistan, they're gonna like some of the Iraqi Kurds I know are gonna get pissed at me for saying this, but like even Iraqi Kurdistan, some of their very basic stuff that they've tried to do as a foundation is very similar to confederalism. Iraqi Kurdistan is more tribal based versus, like, hey, this city area does their own thing, this city area does their own thing. But like they're all very similar in ideology. It's just they'll never agree on it together as one, which is one reason why, like, I think a majority of the Kurds understand, like, we'll never have like, one all four parts is one greater Kurdistan. It might have been feasible in the early 1900s if they would have got their stuff together, but like post Ottoman Empire, it was probably possible. But nowadays, with how everything's so interlocked, I don't think it would work. And being a landlocked country is not a benefit. It weakens you substantially to your neighbors. If your neighbors don't like you, you're pretty fucked. And I like the Iranian Kurds also knew for them to take on the Iranian regime, they need to, fight for more of a greater Iran and greater rights within Iran because there's 11 or 13 million Iranian Kurds, depending on how you classify all the various minorities. Because you have Faili Kurds, which are traditionally Shia Kurds that are down like east of Baghdad across the border. You have the Khorasanis, which are in the northeast of Iran that were like separated a long time ago. Like there's a bunch of minor groups that sometimes say they're Kurdish, other times don't. But like when you only have 11 or 13 million people that are somewhat disenfranchised with each other's ethnicity and how they're classed, like you can't really overthrow, the country of Iran. It's just not feasible. But like I would say since like 2014, they've predominantly advocated for a centralized government with, minority rights and minority leadership within those areas. Because traditionally, the Kurdish areas haven't had full recognition as far as like their political level, has always been people from Tehran or everywhere else to help, keep down the insurgency and, keep down Kurdish support. Same goes with the Avaz area, which is the Arabs, which are south of the Kurdish region. Same with your Baluch. Like, they don't typically get a lot of representation within their own government. And same with the military, what you'll find is when they do conscription, when the Kurds have to do their mandatory service, they'll actually throw them all the way on the other side of Iran or put them in other areas so that they're not within their local area. Because obviously,
Oh, I see. No.
a lot of the Iranian Kurds go through their conscription and then they swap over to the Iranian Kurdish side. So like keeping them out of Iranian Kurdish areas when they're in the military is, beneficial to the regime.
Tell us about, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your personal experiences working with the Iranian Kurds and what you experienced that you were up there in the mountains with them.
So just like the Iraqi Kurds, what they lack in tactics and equipment, they make up for with, willpower, high morale. Like they don't lose morale. Like Kurds rarely ever lose morale. It could like you can suffer defeat and the next morning they're dancing, drinking chai, and they still keep a really high level of happiness when it comes to that. But like working with them, like I think honestly, if we were to invade Iran, it makes sense to work with the Kurds, but like we got to make sure it's done in an appropriate manner, because obviously Turkey doesn't want to see a Kurdish threat, and like having PJAK pushed up to the Turkish border would be bad. But like I think there's a way to work with the Kurds, and I think it can be effective, like what we did in Syria. I hope we just don't abandon them like we did in Syria if we do it in Iran. Like the Kurds love the West. They're probably one of the most open cultures when it comes to people, especially the Iranian Kurds. Iranians are less tribal than your Iraqi Kurds. So like when you're in Erbil, everyone's like, yeah, women wear whatever the hell they want for the most part in your main cities. The same goes for the Iranian Kurdish side. And then when you get out to the rural areas, it's more conservative as well. But like the Iranian Kurds are just more open to foreigners, whether it's like Zezmani Khaba is more of your Islamist type group. And even then, like I went and worked with them. Like they're not ISIS, but like they're like, we like Islam. Islam has to be a main part of our focus, which is whatever. They've actually since changed that a little bit since I've been gone. But like even them, they're like, you want to go talk to our female fighters, you want to do whatever you want. They're just open, and like it's I think it's derogatory to say, but they're westernized, if that makes sense. Like their beliefs and their values are similar to ours. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. Whether that's their family life, most of them are Muslim, but like at the end of the day, it's like they keep their religion at home and they keep their family close. So like they're very similar to how, we are in the US, especially from the Midwest, where it's like, hey, we don't give a shit about the federal government. Like they're very independent minded people.
And what were you learning about insurgency and counterinsurgency during this
I mean,
time?
I learned to build my first bomb with them, which was interesting. And like, I mean, I learned a little bit from some other Arab groups in Iraq too, but like, just like understanding how local insurgent groups or local militias or localized resistance groups, how they operate among the local populace was interesting. Because like coming from Iraq and Afghanistan, where we're doing counterinsurgency, you don't ever get to see like the inside picture on like, like obviously Afghanistan was largely because the Taliban would threaten everyone, but like you don't get to see the other side of it where it's like, okay, they're not threatening people. They're helping out the community, doing whatever. It's like building a school or delivering supplies through the mountains, or like you don't get when you're fighting an insurgency and you've never been on the other side of it, you don't see exactly like when you'd always ask, why are these people working for them?
Right.
And then like when you're on the opposite side of it, you get a better understanding of like just how hard it is to defeat an insurgency, especially one that has a lot of grassroots movement, has a lot of local support. Like, I don't think we ever would have defeated the Taliban or even a lot of like, or pacified some of these areas in Iraq just because of how rooted it is in like family, tribe, and like you're one of us versus like an outsider. When it comes to like how insurgencies gather local support in a non-violent way, like it's really hard to counter that as a foreign force, like honestly. And if you don't have a strong local government that isn't going to act like assholes to the local population when flare-ups happen, you're never going to defeat insurgency. Like I honestly don't think Israel's ever going to defeat the Palestinian stuff or the Lebanese stuff with what they're doing. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of internal change within whatever government, like for it to work out in Lebanon, like the Lebanese government really has to push for change and breaking that like cultural tie to resistance. And like that's something that like the Kurds have been doing it since the 40s, like, and they still weren't broken in, even today. So almost 85, 90 years later, they still have a low level insurgency. Like they do attacks once every couple of weeks. It costs the Iranians a lot of money. But like trying to break that like era of resistance, or like how the network's been built up over decades is hard, especially if you keep killing like religious leaders, or in like the Iranians case, they hung like Qazi Muhammad, who literally was like, okay, we'll lay down our arms and surrender. And then, they hung him in a city square. So they turned him into a martyr. And like that still, even today, like most of your Kurds know who he is, even like your Iraqi Kurds, Syrian Kurds, everyone knows who Qazi Muhammad is. So like that oral history and the history that keeps getting sent down after generations, is hard to break that. So like insurgencies, I think, are like almost impossible in most cases. Like obviously you have your outliers, like Tamil Tigers basically were defeated, but that also took 60 plus years and tens of thousands of lives. Like insurgencies are just one of those things that are really hard to defeat. Especially it's even more harder as a foreign force. Like, man, we would go into Iranian villages, which like a day earlier had IRGC guards there that do their fucking little patrols around. And like we would stay in like a local's house. They'd give us food, water, and we didn't threaten them. We didn't do anything. We just knocked on the door. They're like, "Yeah, come in. Here's our pamphlet for like our political ideology for the Kurds. What is your main issues around?" And like even if they're like, "Oh, well, we don't believe in your political system," they wouldn't kick you out of the village. Like most of them were like, "Yeah, tomorrow, please leave. We don't want issues." And then we'd say, "Okay, hey, that's fine. Here's a number. If anyone in the village wants to join, they can call." And usually, you'd get one or two people calling a week saying, "Hey, the IRGC or the local SEPA just roughed up my relative. I'm over it. Let's go." So like, again, like, man, insurgencies, you can write about them. Like, I don't think it's going to be like, they're just like an outlier when it comes to warfare. It's hard to defeat. And like being able to see how an insurgency functions from the inside was interesting, and like it gave me a better understanding of just what we are up against in Iraq, and even more so in Afghanistan, because in Afghanistan you had the tribal ties, you had the religious ties, and then you also had, you know, the threat of violence. So like you have three things working against you, four if you include an ineffective government. And like we spent 20 fucking years there, and it's like no wonder.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just it was just a good experience. Like it showed me like I don't think our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were for nothing. Saddam was bad. Most of the Iraqis you talk to that weren't former Sunni Baathists are like, yeah, thank you for getting rid of Saddam. Also, we fucking hate you for screwing our country up after Saddam was gone. Most of your Afghans are pretty much in the same boat. They were like, thank you for getting rid of the Taliban initially, but like you completely fucked us for the next 15 years
Yeah.
on,
Like, why
you
are you
know,
still here?
how this, yeah, you know, it was like they're gone. Give us our whole government back. We'll deal with it or attempt to deal with it. And like, yeah, we fucked up the hearts and mind after. Like, what do you do after you get rid of the leadership?
Right.
You know,
Right.
so
I guess I really need to ask you before we move on, because of our current war with Iran, America's war with Iran. And there was very predictably, I think, a week or two of news media coverage focusing on the Iranian Kurds and thinking that the Iranian Kurds were going to be like our savior in this conflict and they would dispose of the Iranian regime and all this sort of stuff. I just want to ask your opinion, your unique perspective that you have on this. What role could the Iranian Kurds play in helping America like that? And would they? Are they even? Is that even in their interest?
I think so the Iranian Kurds, if we wouldn't have fucked over the Syrian Kurds, and if we wouldn't have fucked over the Iraqi Kurds, you know, 8 years prior, I think the Iranian Kurds would have been fully on board to say, you know, if you're bombing them here, we'll send ground troops in. And you know, the Iranian Kurds did mobilize. They did. I won't go into full specifics, but like they're fully mobilized right now. They called their members back from Europe and other places, just in case it gets to a point where they can push in. But the West misjudged them in thinking that they were just going to start an offensive without full support. And I don't blame them. Like if you look at it from an Iranian Kurdish standpoint, it's like, okay, yeah, they're bombing the Iranian regime, but like, are they going to continue to back us, or am I just going to send all my men to slaughter?
Right.
Because like at the end of the day, there might be they could probably get between 12 and 20,000 soldiers, but they don't have armor. Like they don't have tanks to drive across the border. They don't have heavy artillery. You know, they have light weapons. They have mortars. They have pickup trucks. They have guys inside of these villages and supporters all over. But if the Iranians aren't occupied enough elsewhere, they're just going to send the full force of their military on the Kurdish parts. And not only will the Kurdish groups lose a lot of people, but more than likely the Iranians will just destroy whole villages, especially in the rural areas where there's not a lot of communications that'll get out. You know, like if they tried to if they got into like Sanandash, for instance, they probably wouldn't destroy that whole city. But if they were able to fight the Kurds in some of these smaller, you know, less populated villages, they'd just full on slaughter the whole village and, you know, level it. So like the Iranian Kurds saying, hey, hold up a minute. Like, we're not just going to jump into this without, you know, some actual backing. Like, I don't know how anyone expected that not to happen. Like you saw on CNN and Fox, everyone's like, oh, the Iranian Kurds are behind us. It's like, well, it should be the opposite way around. Are
Right.
we behind the Iranian Kurds? And, you know, have we approached them properly and facilitated what they need to cross the border? Because like on the Iranian border, every 2 to 5 kilometers is an Iranian outpost. There's like a border guard. They have artillery. So like literally sandwiched on the border and sometimes even inside Iraqi territory, there's an Iranian outpost. And then usually 5 kilometers behind that on a high hilltop is, you know, artillery, grad, or whatever else. So like if we were truly going to, utilize the Kurds and build a partnership here, we need to hit these like every one of those border posts should be getting bombed. And like after that, there's some areas inside of the Iranian Kurdish, as well as like your other minority areas where they have like QRF bases. Those are pretty easy to hit too. But like we didn't do any of that. So I don't know how we expected the Iranian Kurds just to drive across the border. You know, like it's one of those things where it's like, it's wishful thinking. And I don't think anyone in the admin really thought about it well when they started voicing that and like when the leaks started coming out.
Yeah, they must have some conception that, you know, if America was serious, they would be embedding ODAs with us and sending us probing across the border. And so that like we're in it with them, right?
Yeah, and like there was like as far as I understand, there was none of that. Obviously, there was some talks. Like so, I spoke with the Iranian Kurdish groups as well as some of the other minorities, like the Baluch and the Arab. And like there was some behind the scene talks that did happen, but it never really progressed into like, here is the support we're going to give you, whether it's like, you know, an ODA team with a JTAC or like, hey, we'll cover this area with airstrikes. So like if they do try to push armor towards you, like if the Iranians just try to do, you know, light infantry against the Kurds, if the Kurds are able to get into the cities in these other areas, like it's not going to work out for them. But the biggest issue with the Iranian side is number one, drones, and then number two, armor. Like the Kurds don't have weapons against armor. Yeah, you have RPGs, but like RPGs past like 150 meters. If you're trying to hit a moving vehicle, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Done it. Tried it. I think I've hit maybe like 2 vehicles in my life with an RPG, and I've fired a lot of RPGs. So like, yeah, like if we were serious about like regime change, and if the admin was serious about regime change, you know, they would have approached the situation differently. I don't think we were ever actually. I think what we thought was going to happen is we bomb the fuck out of them, kill the Ayatollah, the whole defense council, and the regime just collapses.
Right.
But that was a huge. That was about as dumb as the Russians invading Ukraine and thinking the Ukrainians were going to collapse.
Right.
Because like you have the Ayatollah, obviously, who's a figurehead, but the Ayatollah is like the religious side of it. What really holds the regime together is the IRGC. And like even and like what we just saw, like you can kill a bunch of the IRGC upper leadership, but at the end of the day, the IRGC are more of your hardliners. Like obviously some will always flip sides, but a majority of them are they're not gonna move away from that foundation of like, you know, Islamic Republic of Iran, we're the true resistance of the region type deal. Yep. So like I think we severely misjudged it almost on the level of like Russia trying to land all their VDV and Hostomel type shit.
A lot of people put off buying a new mattress because it feels like a hassle. Too many options, too many claims, and no real way to tell what's actually going to hold up. GhostBed makes that decision easier. GhostBed is a family-run company with more than 20 years of mattress-making experience backed by deep manufacturing expertise. Their approach is straightforward. Focus on quality materials, smart construction, and a consistency over time, not flashy features or complicated sales tactics. Every GhostBed mattress is built for long-term comfort using durable foam and proven cooling technology to help regulate temperature while you sleep. It's designed to feel reliable night after night, not just when it's brand new. And if you're not sure which mattress is right for you, GhostBed's online mattress quiz helps narrow it down quickly. Whether you're a side sleeper who needs a little plushness or someone who prefers a firmer feel, the quiz matches you with the right option based on how you actually sleep. They also keep pricing grounded. GhostBed mattresses cost up to 50% less than comparable brands. You could rest easy knowing you're getting one of the best values at this quality level. Every mattress comes with a 101-night sleep trial, an industry-leading warranty, and fast free shipping. And as a Team House listener, you can get an extra 10% off your order. Just go to ghostbed.com/house and use the promo code HOUSE at checkout. That's ghostbed.com/house, code HOUSE for an additional 10% off site-wide. Upgrade your sleep with GhostBed, makers of the coolest beds in the world. Some exclusions apply. See site for details. Thank you, GhostBed, for sponsoring the show. Thank you guys for helping support the show. Bye.
So the next phase of your life, you did something that not too many Kurds can do, is come down out of the mountains. And where did you go next?
So I messed around in Africa for a little bit, boring, just advising stuff. And then in like 2019, I was back in the U.S. I started up like an agricultural business, doing like livestock repairs. So like Iowa's huge with hog. Like we have beef too, but not as large as some other states. But like with our hog industry in Iowa, there's a lot of opportunities for like maintenance, repair of the hog barns, as well as like cleaning them out. Because like after each rotation of animals, you have to like disinfect it so they don't get diseases from previous ones. You have to clean everything. And like mass, what do they call it? Not mass farming, but like those big hog refineries. Like while there's definitely disadvantages to them, it's like a necessity now if you want cheap meat, basically. So like I opened a company up, started doing that. I worked for a local friend's construction company as well while I was doing it. And then in 2021, I was going to run for Congress for Iowa. Started getting everything organized for that and started doing like traveling in December of 21 and then January 2022. And then basically that's when Russia started putting troops on the border. So I was like, well, I'm going to Ukraine. So I quit the congressional thing. Like the congressional thing was like, so I get really frustrated every time I go. So I've lived out of the U.S. a majority of my adult life since 2014. But every time I go back to Iowa, I go back to my hometown. And, I'm a rural community person. My hometown's like 9,000 people, 10,000 people. Every time I go back to rural Iowa, I see businesses closed. I see family farmers struggling. People who bought their family farm from their father, like people I went to school with, running a farm that their families owned for generations. And, they're struggling in debt. They're barely making ends meet. And so like in 2021, I was like, fuck it. I wanted to actually try to bring a voice to like rural communities, because I don't think the Republicans or Democrats really speak for a lot of Americans, especially today. Like honestly, like our two-party system sucks. But without getting overly into politics and getting angry about it, I decided to run. I was a super red district. I would never have gotten the support from the Republicans. So I ran as like a conservative Democrat. So I would go to and like Democrats in Iowa outside of Des Moines are pretty much like, they're not like the DC Democrat bullshit. They're more like center purple, but like I would go to the like the local Democratic committee meetings and stuff. And I'd be like, okay, like here's my view on abortion. Like some of it should be outlawed, some shouldn't, like, more women's rights thing. And then they'd always be like, what's your opinion on firearms? And I'd always be like, everyone deserves a gun. Like, like I'm pro 2A. Like I'm from rural Iowa. Like I grew up around firearms. My dad brought me hunting at a young age, taught me firearm safety, taught me like to respect it because it's a weapon. And I believe the right to self-defense is like something that's inherent to everyone. So like saying I'm against weapons, like that's never going to happen. I don't think it should. I think we need less laws on firearms, to be honest, and we just need more fucking education. Like I'm not a fan of the ATF at all. I think they've overstretched their boundaries for years. But so I was running as a like probably. I know I pissed off a lot of Democrats when I initially put my hat in the ring, just because of like I voted Republican. I voted for Trump in 2016. I've historically voted for Republican mayors, governors, everything. Up until that point, the only Democrat I voted for was J.D. Vance. And like J.D. Vance was like basically almost like me. He believed in Second Amendment. He believed in all that. He was a little bit more liberal on the economic side as far as like free healthcare and stuff. But he was like the first person that I actually ended up helping campaign for him and doing some other stuff. But like he was the first one where I was like, okay, not all Democrats are dumbasses. Like there are some, like not everything has to be about like DC Democrat policy. Nothing has to be about like Republican DC policy. Like we need to get back to like local issues, dealing with it, and then pushing the local issues at like the national front. But anyway, in January of 2022, when Russia's really started pushing on the border, and the U.S. was warning it consistently, saying, "Hey, this is coming." I made the choice, basically, like, "Hey, I'm going to Ukraine. It's just a matter of time." And then I ended up in Ukraine end of February, and then I was fighting in March. Like it was like land, and like so I crossed over from Romania. We actually drove across from like a nondescript checkpoint on like the very northeastern side. Like it was like a dirt road fucking border crossing. There was like no one there. Ukraine was like, "What the fuck are you coming here for?" And I was like, they're like, "What's the reason for your visit?" I was like, "I'm coming to fight the Russians." And they're like, "Ha, there's no war." And I was like, "Okay." Anyway, I ended up in Kyiv, and at the start of the war, I ended up with a bunch of Ukrainians. So at the start of the war, what happened is once the bombing started and everything, the local city governments, and I think it was at the orders of like the federal, like Zelensky's group, but basically it was like, if you want to defend Ukraine, show up to certain locations, bring your like your Ukrainian ID or your veterans card or whatever ID you have, and they would issue you a weapon. You get broken down into groups, like civil defense, basically. And at the start, it was just, it was chaos because nobody, there was some semblance of order, but it was more of a semblance of order because of Ukrainian society, not because of like policing, or like there was nobody like saying, go here, don't do that, don't do this. It was more of, okay, we're a group of Ukrainians, and my friend said the Russians are over on the western side. We're going to go over, we'll meet up with this person, and then we'll form an idea on what to do. You didn't have chaos where people were breaking into shop. At least in most areas, you didn't have people like looting stores, committing heinous crimes. Like it was a fairly united defense, and like, okay, fuck the Russians. Like I'm going to go fight. They're coming to my city type deal. And this happened in like a majority of the areas where Ukraine could get weapons out in time to the local people. And then Zelensky said, like on the 28th or March 1st or whatever it was, 27th or something, he declared like they're doing a foreign legion. So I got put on a bus and we went south out of Kyiv and then back up and over all the way to Lviv. And I didn't know it at the time, but I got brought to Yavoriv. So Yavoriv is that military base in the far west of Lviv. It was like the main training ground for all of, like, NATO had troops there.
Yeah. It was the one where it got blasted by ballistic missiles, didn't it?
Yeah, like 3 days after so I think that got hit on like the 5th or 6th, and by that time we were already back in the war. So I showed up at Yavoriv. We get off the bus. I got brought, like, some Ukrainians were with me. We go into the base. There's like this fucking tent there with a guy speaking broken English. He's like, "You're here to fight?" I was like, "Yeah, I've been in Kyiv." Like, fuck, I was fighting. He's like, "Okay, come here, sign this paper." He's like, "You're going to be enlisting in the Ukraine Armed Forces. Here's your contract terms." It was in fucking Ukrainian, couldn't read it. He's like, "Get out your phone, Google Translate." It's like, okay. Didn't even care. I was like, whatever, just signed it. Didn't even read it. Like, no fucks given. Because like I honestly thought, even with the stiff resistance at the start, I honestly thought we were fucked. So like I didn't give a shit if my contract said you're in the military for the next 20 years. Like I was like, man, we're gonna have one hell of a good fight for a month or two, and then we're fucked. But like at that point, I was just in it. So signed my name on it, took a picture of it on my phone. And then he's like, okay, go over to this brick building. We went over there. I met a bunch of, at that point, there was like 12 other Americans. There was like a former ranger there who had also been fighting in Kyiv at the start, but he was here like 6 months before. I think he was going to university or something in Kyiv. And then there was Georgian there, Viking. He's all over. He's pretty well known. And then there was some guys from, I think there was like 5 guys from like the 75th. So like Rangers, there was some soft guys there. Dan Swift, the former Navy SEAL that was killed in Bakhmut, was there. And like, we all introduced each other. It was like, you know, what's your background? I was like, dude, I was Army National Guard, did Iraq, Afghanistan. Like most of these guys are like, I was 10 years in, you know, 3rd Bat of 75th. And I'm like, fuck me. Like they're up here. I'm like down here when it comes to like training and skill level. Cause like,
you have some insurgency experience though.
yeah. So like I had more of the real world experience, but like, to be honest, so like, even now, like I've got 12 years in war. Like I've been actively fighting in war zones for actually over 12 years now. But like when somebody from like an upper tier unit, like the way that upper tier units, like your 75th, your soft guys, like Green Berets and like your SEALs, and even some like your JTAC type people, when you watch how they do their maneuvers and how they were trained, it's like I might have the experience when it comes to like fighting and understanding a battlefield environment, but they have like the fluidity and like the technical skills to where it's like robot, like not robotic in a bad way, but like, you know what I mean? Like you could blindfold them and they'll hit a fucking target at 100 meters because like their weapon marksmanship's on point, how they operate, how they move, how they communicate. Like it's just on another tier level. And that's nothing against like Marines, like your standard Marines or your standard Army. It's just like you can usually tell in combat when somebody has that more advanced training. Even guys, even like obviously some will always break, but even like guys who never had combat, but they went through like Rangers and they spent time at the regiment, like you can just tell like a switch flips immediately. For the ones that don't get scared, like some people just freeze up, but like for a vast majority of your upper tier units, there's just like a flip that switches and it's just automatic. Like there's no like, hey, come here, I need to move you over here. Like if they've spent time in any of the upper tier units, just how they move and they do stuff, it's on a whole nother level. Even like with my experience, like I'm nowhere near like the technical level, and I'll probably never be at that. Like I'm sloppy compared to what they are. And like even with like an AK, I'm sloppy with it. But like I got in this group and like I think there might have been like 2 civilians that were there, and we're like, okay, you're just like all the soft guys, like they're gonna be our fucking ammo bitches and just carry ammo over for us. And everyone's like, okay, raise your hand if you want them in. Everyone's like, yeah, fuck it, we need ammo guys. So we're telling each other about our backgrounds, and I was like, oh yeah, I spent 4 years as part of like a semi-insurgency fighting the Iranians and partly the Iraqis. And I was like, I can build bombs, shoot RPGs, and like Soviet weapons, easy. So they're like, okay, that's interesting. And then I ended up getting a PKM, and then I went to, so originally they sent one of the Ukrainians to the warehouse to grab weapons. He brought back like the most basic shit, and there was like a huge argument, like, where's your rockets? Where's all this? He's like, fine, you want to go get stuff, go do it. So I hop in the back of this troop transport truck with the English-speaking Ukrainian, whose call sign's Lou, and then I think it was another American. We go to this warehouse, and there's just like fucking rockets stacked everywhere, and like, he's like, what do you want? And I was like, well, what do they have? And they're like, well, we have mortars over here. I was like, fuck the mortars. We're not going to have time to deploy them. Like, let's like avoid the mortars. Let's, stay heavily mobile and quick. So they're like, we have RPGs. I was like, cool. They had M72 laws, like the new A3 model or A2. I was like, sweet. We need, and they're I think in a box, it's either 6 or 10 come in a box or 6 or 12. I was like, sweet. We want 20 fucking boxes. I was like, give us like 200 fucking laws, put them on the truck. They're like, okay. I was like, cool, give us RPG 7s. They're like, okay, how many do you want? I was like, give us 100 anti-tank. Like we basically pilfered this fucking warehouse of rockets. I was like, give us Stingers. So we got these boxes of Stingers.
Holy shit.
We found out later that when the US or whatever country sent these over immediately, they shipped the fucking handguards separate. And when they got to the Ukrainian warehouses, the handguards were not put back in the boxes. They ended up at another warehouse. So we ended up having like fucking 40 goddamn Stinger missiles with no fucking trigger assembly. So they were useless. But like, we found that out once we got to Kyiv because we're idiots and didn't check it. It was just, hey, the box isn't open. Throw the whole crate in the fucking truck. So we got on this, we ended up getting on like a Greyhound type bus that same day, or no, excuse me, that morning, the next morning, heading straight to Kyiv. They're like, load everything into this Greyhound bus. So there's like 18 of us on this bus, and like we packed so many fucking rockets and munitions and everything that we're literally sitting on munitions. Like there's no room to sit, and like nobody knew where we were going. None of that. We get to Kyiv and you can hear explosions, you hear artillery going off, and they're like, okay, get in this building. It was actually a hotel right next to the Chinese embassy because they figured the Russians weren't going to bomb it because they didn't want to blow up the Chinese embassy. And they didn't. They never bombed the hotel. It wasn't Hotel Ukraine. Oh man, it was a nice one. I'd have to go look up what the name of it is. But like basically we were like within 200 meters of this Chinese embassy, and like it was like, okay, we know for sure the Russians aren't bombing the Chinese, or they're not going to risk blowing the Chinese up because the Chinese were still in their embassy. They didn't leave. So we get there, we offload all these rockets into this fucking hotel lobby. And at that point, most of us still didn't know each other's names. Like, I mean, we knew each other's backgrounds, and like, we were just usually like, hey, you come here, help offload this, help offload that. We didn't even zero our weapons. Like we just grabbed our rifle, got all this shit, and went straight to Kyiv. It was like zeroed on the front line type shit. Like there was no time. I think maybe one of the snipers that was a former ranger, he was given a little bit of time to zero his sniper rifle in Yavoriv, but otherwise nobody did anything. It was basically like, figure it out when you get to Kyiv type shit. That day we got in Kyiv, we slept, and then that morning they were like trying to figure out what to do with us. And our soft guys, like Seal Dan and some of the other Rangers, were like consistently arguing with the Ukrainian leadership saying, hey, let's go fight. We're ready. We're ready. Like basically being like typical pushy fucking Americans. And eventually the Ukrainian command was like, all right, fuck it. You want to fight? He got on, his call sign name is Vadim. Got on the radio, screamed a bunch of Ukrainian. And then he's like, get your shit ready. You're going to the front. We're going to go patrol a forest. So we grab all our kit, throw it in the back of these like LM, like basically deuce and a halves, like Kama's trucks, old school shit. They drove us. We didn't know it at the time, but we actually got driven to the front line in Moshun. They dropped us off at the time, probably like 3 kilometers from active fighting. And when we initially got there, there was no one started shooting at us originally with artillery or anything. So he's like, okay, drop your kit. You're not going to need anything. Just get your weapons, bring ammo, bring rockets, like leave the rest of your kit. You don't need your cold weather kit or nothing. We're just going to patrol the forest. So we start walking through this forest, and like 10 minutes in, he's like, okay, we're going to go to the trenches and fight. And we're like, man, you just told us to leave all our fucking kit behind because we're just doing a patrol. So we maybe get like 800 meters through this fucking forest, and then we start getting smacked with artillery. And I remember it was funny as fuck. Like most of the people took off running, and like the artillery was going over top of us pretty far still. And I looked over to my right. There's a guy, we call him Doc Jesse. He's Canadian, former military. And he's looking at me. He's like, do you think we should run? And I was like, I think we're good for a while. So like me and him are walking while everyone else is like sprinting through these forests. I was like, fuck, I'm not running. Like there's no point. Nothing's even blowing up around us. And we're literally walking through the woods while everyone's in front of us smoking and joking. And all of a sudden you hear a boom. They started dropping airburst rounds into the forest. And like I looked over at Jesse and I was like, we should probably fucking run now. So like we sprinted up, caught up with our guys. But like it was just like one of those things at the start of the war is like, I wouldn't do that now. Like I'd be like, okay, like if they're shooting over top of us, they're probably actually trying to hit us. We were just like, oh, they're just lobbing rounds randomly. It's like, no, they probably knew where we were. They were just trying to, grid us in properly. Like that's just one of those dumb things where it's like, a really stupid decision that luckily didn't cost anyone their lives. So we get to the edge of this town. The town's name is Moshun. There's like a really shitty trench dug like waist deep. So everyone hops in it, and the Ukrainians like, yeah, we're trying to figure out where everyone is, and we're getting shot at from the Russians in this town, and like everyone's like, what the fuck are we doing? So I was like, you know what, fuck it, let's just push into the town. So I just like take off running into the village like a retard with a PKM, and I get maybe like 100 meters in front of the trench, and I look behind me, and the Ukrainians like, come back, come back. So I run back through gunfire, hop in this fucking trench, and the Ukrainian Vadim was like, okay, now we go. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? So I ran back through the fire, got a machine gun position down, and then the rest of the guys pushed up. We got into this house, and there was like 4 Ukrainians already there. Our Ukrainian commander Vadim was like, told the Ukrainians to leave. This is now our house. It was Ukrainian military. So basically, he's like, don't shoot. We're going to stay in this house, and when the Russians come, then we'll shoot. Like, the Ukrainians were still, at that point, we're still pretty pessimistic, and like, I don't think they fully trusted us on like what our capabilities were. Like, they were like, okay, yeah, you're special forces, but like, this is a real war. You don't know what you're doing. So we sat in that house for probably a day and a half, getting like artillery's going off around us. Every time we would shoot a weapon, our Ukrainian commander would be like, okay, like go up to the second floor. There's Russians down the road, you know, bring your sniper rifle, shoot them, then come back down. So like we would do that, you know, every other hour or whatever. And like the Russians were fucking retarded. Like, so our second story building looks straight down this road. Like we could see 800 to 1,000 meters down this road. And the Russians were at the edge of the village coming into it. And they had took over 2 houses at the edge of the village. And like they wouldn't stand in the windows of the houses, but they would come outside and smoke cigarettes literally in the middle of the road. So like our ranger dude was just fucking smacking the shit out of these Russians. Like, and it wasn't 1 or 2. Like it was like consistent. Like they would come out, smoke a cigarette, and I was like, all right, fucking shoot him. And he shot this one guy, hit him lower mid, just dropped him, like pelvis shot him. Not on purpose, it was accident, just aimed low. But we had saw that there was like a group of like 3, like the guy was alive, screaming, whatever. And there was like 4 Russians at this edge of like, we could barely see them behind a wall. And we're like, okay, they're going to get their buddy. We'll let them, you know, we'll let them grab their guy so he fucks off and we don't have to listen to him scream. So this Russian runs out in the middle of the road, and instead of grabbing his buddy, literally takes his weapon, takes his shoes, and fucks off again. And like we're like, what in the fuck? Just left this injured dude out there. So we just left him screaming, and you know he bled out eventually, probably a few hours later, hour later. By day 2.5, our commander at that point was like, we're out of food and water. I'm gonna go get food and water. Don't do anything. He's like, don't shoot. Just stay in this room. Don't do anything. Literally, like, within 10 minutes of him being gone, the soft guys and the Rangers are like, let's fuck shit up, because, like, he's gone. Like, we're, like, he's basically was like, we're in charge now. And basically, it was just, like, they were like, go up on the second story, and, like, you know, we know the Russians are in this building. Go let off, like, 100-round burst to your PKM and see what they do. So I go up on the second floor where this bedroom is. There's a baby crib up there. And I like move the baby crib like further back in front of the window so I can put the PKM on it. And I literally just unload a full like single 100-round burst through this fucking PKM and fucking just spray this building down. And like nobody shot back at me directly. And then I run back downstairs. I was like, yeah, I did it. And they're like, okay, let's see what happens. They didn't do fucking anything. So then it was like, okay, let's get the rockets out. And they're like, okay, we have to go outside the building to shoot these. I was like, guys, you can shoot fucking just, it'll be loud, but you can shoot them inside. They're like, oh, they're like back pressure. I'm like, fuck the back pressure. Doesn't matter. You know, overpressure, be damn, back blast. Just don't stand, like stay downstairs, run upstairs, shoot the rocket. So, and like, they're like, no, we're not doing that. I'm like, fine, I'll do it. So I grab like a pack of the M72 laws, and I go up into the bedroom again, one of the bedrooms. And I just let off 2 rockets into these houses down the road and just smoked the shit out of them. Caught them on fire, hit the roof, then hit in one of the windows. And at that point, the Russians finally reacted. It was extremely loud. I couldn't hear. There's definitely overpressure, even with laws and buildings. But like after that, probably like 3 or 4 hours when things started calming down again, the Ukrainian drove back up in a fucking van, loaded full of ammo, food, water, and basically like loaded everything into the house. And he's like, he looked down the road. And he's like, why are their buildings on fire? And we're like, well, we got in a fight. So, and like, he got out binoculars, was looking, and then he came back downstairs. He was like, good job. Go ahead. Like, basically do whatever the fuck you want, kill the Russians. And from that point on, it was basically like, we would send out, so the Rangers and like the Navy SEAL guy, they'd be like, okay, we're going to go out and do fucking raids at night. Nobody had night vision. Like, they're basically like in pitch black. They're like, we're going to go fucking, like, we know the Russians are in this house because we can see the muzzle flashes and like they aren't pushing. So we're going to push them. So they'd be like, okay, Ryan, like go look through the windows, see the chicken coop, go get in that chicken coop and like, we'll radio you or yell if we need you to, lay down support by fire. And then, typical lift fire, shift fire stuff. And I kid you not, like the Rangers and this SEAL just went through that town, just fucking creating hell. It was fucking insane. And this is, again, no night vision, nothing. Like they were good. And so we did that for like 7 days. And at one point, the Russians did try to push armor down the road. We had a Ukrainian shoot an NLAW at like a BMP. And the BMP was so close that the NLAW literally just tinged off of it because the safe arming distance is like 20 meters or whatever. And like it was literally below, like our house is here. You could literally look out the window. It was directly below us. They didn't have infantry with it. It was just, they sent a lone BMP up. It was like, okay, fucking let it get close and then we'll blow it up from above. Stupid mistake. Luckily, the BMP drove backwards, tried to go down a side route, and then cut back up because they weren't sure what shot at them. And so our commander called in a Ukrainian tank. A Ukrainian tank just comes flying out of this tree line. And now you have a BMP facing off against the tank. The tank fired literally one shot, and I kid you not, that fucking BMP just went everywhere, like in pieces everywhere. Like the turret, like the top of it where the 30 mil is, just went fucking flying. First time I've ever seen armor blown up like that close. And you could feel the fucking pressure off of it. So that got blown up. And then the Russians were like, the tank drives back into the woods. They shoot artillery at it. Don't hit it. The Russians were dumb enough to like, okay, like let's try 2 BMPs. And this time we'll put infantry on both sides of the vehicle. So like they didn't even do like the typical Soviet behind it. They had them on the side of the vehicle. So we let them get like fucking 50 meters from us and just fucking machine gun the absolute fuck out of these Russians. And like, I kid you not, their reaction was just like a deer in the headlight. The BMPs tried to like turn around on the road and like we were hitting them with like, it was just a clusterfuck. They didn't have a clue what the fuck to do. Not once did our building get targeted in 9 days by anything direct. We had a sniper that took some shots at us when we were being pretty stupid and like full on silhouetting ourselves and like standing directly in the building like I am right now, like torso on up, just being retards. But otherwise, not once did we get hit with a tank shell, not once with artillery. We had a Ukrainian tank shoot at us on accident. And actually, at one point, we didn't realize this, but the Russians had gotten where we initially got dropped off. The Russians actually had took that spot, and then they took a part north of us from the Georgian Legion. And so, like at one point, the Ukrainians in the tree line behind us, like 500-600 meters away, literally thought we were dead. And we had left some guys in a trench behind us as well. And some of the non-soft guys, we didn't know this at the time, but a lot of them had abandoned their position when they thought we were overran. And there were some Americans, I'm not going to name names because like both the Americans that fled at that initial battle ended up coming back to Ukraine later, and they redeemed themselves in combat. But like there was some other foreigners that, just left us without trying to support us. Canada, Britain, just guys that were like not ready to die type deal. And like once we found that out after the fact, once we had gotten out of Moshun and back to the hotel, and the Ukrainians like, we're going to bring them back and they'll continue to fight. And it was basically like, if you bring the guys that deserted us in combat back here, we'll probably shoot them ourselves, because like they were basically our flank. They were supposed to like prevent us from getting attacked from behind, and for like apparently a whole day there was just nobody behind us. Like there was nothing other than the tanks and the tree lines 2 kilometers back that they'd call it for support. There was just nobody there. Luckily, Ukrainians had backfilled where the foreigners fucked off out of. And some of the foreigners, believe it or not, the 2 civilians that we took in never left the position. They were the only ones that really stuck it out there. So that was interesting. And I think one of them's still fighting here. So, but yeah, we fought in Moshun, and like none of us got killed. Nobody got severely injured. Everyone got fucking frostbite. Like I remember when we were pulling out, we pulled back to the trench line, and it got to the point where it was so cold. All I had was a sweatshirt like this on, and like I found a big ass like wood Soviet era ammo box, and I literally crawled inside of it and shut the fucking lid. And when we were getting ready to pull out in the morning, one of the guys was doing a head count, and they're like, "Where the fuck is Ryan? Where the fuck is Ryan?" And I like opened this ammo crate, and they're like, "Dude, what the fuck's wrong with you?" I was like, "Man, I was freezing. Like, it's whatever." So then we actually had to run through artillery fire to get back out. And at that point, none of the guys that stuck around and actually fought, none of them were like, "Okay, fuck this, we're leaving." They were like, it was still good. Like we still had, like we did some good work. We killed a lot of fucking Russians. So we get back to the hotel, and at that point, they had brought a bunch more foreigners in. The foreigners that came after us were, I would say, less professional minded and disciplined than what should have been there. Some of them had broken into a bar and were drinking already. One of them like ND'd their rifle in a fucking hotel. Like there was literally issues from the get-go. So like our more senior leadership senior leadership being like guys who had the most time in service, because it was basically like, okay, you were National Guard, so like you're not going to be the one in charge. I was a former Navy SEAL. I'll do like the mission planning. And then you were like a former master sergeant, so you're going to take the actual control. So like we differentiated like the roles out predominantly. It was almost fluid. Like nobody really said, "Hey, I want to be in charge," or "I want to be in charge." It just like fell naturally on certain people. The guys that were like the commanders of it basically went to the Ukrainians, were like, "Hey, we don't want to be with these fuckers. Like, put us back out on an operation." So the next day we went to Irpin. And Irpin was probably more of a force on force fight as far as like, go into this town and we're going to, like full on assault Russian positions.
That's the area where the Russians committed like all kinds of heinous war crimes, right?
So that was, they did some in Irpin, but like Bucha and another village like more west of that is where they did a lot of that. Irpin was where the Russians got bogged down in like one of the larger cities. So Irpin's here, and then you have Bucha that's like up here. They managed to get inside of Bucha and some of these outlying areas, and they were pushing into Irpin. I think when we got to Irpin, the Russians had taken maybe like a third of it, or it might have been like half of it. And basically at that point, the Ukrainians were like, "We're not sure what block the Russians are on. We know they're in this direction. Here's what we're going to do. You guys are going to take your squad. You're going to go down these roads, and, you're going to find the Russians, and you're going to engage the Russians." So we walk in. Initially, we walk through this fucking field, and then there's that blown up bridge that you see at the start going into Irpin. We walk across like a little wood plank they put down it. all the vehicles are still like on the road. Some of them are blown up, most of them aren't. So we get to this little lodge area. It was like a little resort right outside of Irpin. They're like, okay, you're gonna follow us in. Like, we didn't have a map. Nobody had a map. Nobody had, like, we had some guys with ATAC, but like the Ukrainians didn't do routes on ATAC. It was just basically like, look, we're gonna go down this road. We'll take our first left and then our first right, and then we'll, decide what happens from that, or we'll get shot at, figure it out. And then it was like, we'll also maybe find out where the other Ukrainian units are, because like there's Ukrainians like all over Irpin that were fighting, but it was like a decentralized fight because, again, a lot of the initial fighting in Ukraine was done by civilians, either veterans of the Donbass War, the ATO from 2014, and they had gotten out, or it was literally just civilians that wanted to fight the Russians. And there was like a really lack of coordination and command at like the tactical level and movement of troops. So our first day in Irpin, we ended up linking up with a bunch of other Ukrainians. This was like actual guys in uniform, and they were like, hey, up in front of us is one of the main parks of Irpin. In that park, the Russians have dug BMPs somewhere on the backside of it. There's like a headquarters there. Be careful if you go into the area. For us, that was more of a, hey, let's see if we can basically assault a battalion-sized element with 12 people and like try to get the jump on them. Because like from our fighting in Moshun, we understood that like close quarters combat, like the Russians were just not even on any close level. So if we could get the initiative and keep the initiative going, like we would be fine attacking a much larger force. The problem with our thought process was we thought they were on the other side of the park, so we thought we could maneuver through, the trees and the park and like get in close to them. What we didn't realize is the Russians were in the middle of the park. So we went up there and we sat down. Myself, I took 2 guys with me because I had the PCAM. One guy had like 1,000 rounds in his backpack. The other guy was carrying rockets and a rifle. And we get near this little hot dog stand hut. And basically I'm like, okay, I'm set. You guys can move in. I can cover you. If something happens, I'll lay down fire. Don't run back to the right. Like they were coming in. I'm like right here. And they came in through the front gate on the right side. I was like, look, if you guys make contact after you cross past me, don't come back to the right. I'm just going to unload, and hopefully they shift fire towards me versus you guys so you can run, and you guys should go to the left side. And basically our guys got like halfway into the park and just got fucking, like next thing you know, it was like just hell on earth unleashed. Like there's 30 mils from BMPs, going off. You have machine guns, you have Dushka, like heavy machine guns. And like, I'm like, holy fuck, those guys are all fucking dead. So I'm looking to see if I can see where they went, because they got into like the trees and you can't really see anything because they're thick trees. And I'm like, fuck. Luckily, my aid gunner is looking left down the road because there was no Ukrainians down there. So he's like our left flank. And I was like, look, if you see anyone come out, let me know. Do not shoot at them right away. It could be friendly. Luckily, the 4 guys that entered this park were able to didn't get hit at all. The sniper had to drop his bag and leave it. So like we lost a rifle, but like none of the guys got hit. So where we were at, you have the park, you have the road that runs along the park, and then you had a parking area that dropped down, and then you had where the apartments were. So I look at my 2 guys, I'm like, hey, we're going to fall back to this overhang so we have like full body coverage. So I let loose a burst. Those guys run back. Once they get set, I then run back as well. At that point, the guys that got ambushed in the park are coming around, and they're like 300 meters to the left of me. They jump down on the same like park embankment. And as they're running up, I'm like, hey, stop, let me, do some cover. And this is all on video. Like I have this whole video. It's fucking nuts. Shit. I'll try to send it to you. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. You can see me fucking around for like 3 minutes trying to prepare a rocket because I couldn't figure out, like, didn't do very good, PCIs, PCEs. I couldn't figure out how to take the safety off of a certain rocket like a fucking retard. And at the time, I was too dumb to read the fucking pictures on this. Like, it's like the M72 law. Like, if you actually turn it over, it says, hey,
Yeah.
there's a pin here, pull it out. Like, there's a little stick figure guy pulling a pin out. And I spent like 4 minutes trying to fuck with this rocket as these guys are getting shot at before we had fallen back because I was just going to lob it into the park. And like, I couldn't figure it out. So I was like, oh, fuck this Soviet shit. Just chucked it on the ground and gave up. But like, always check your safeties. But so anyway, the guys get to me, and like, for them to get back outside of the kill zone, they have to run through maybe like a 20-meter road to then get behind this other apartment complex. And at this point, there's BMPs cracking rounds over our head, machine gun fire, some grenades are getting thrown. And I look at the guys, I was like, look, I'll provide you cover fire, but when you get back to that position, somebody needs to shoot down the road so then I can come back. And what ended up happening is I laid down cover fire, and then for some reason, the Ukrainian command had thought, like, there was an explosion that went off in front where I was, and the Ukrainian command thought I was dead. So they were like, and there's a video of this as well, where like one of the guys is like, Ryan's still back there, Ryan's still back there. And the Ukrainian commander's like, he's dead, let him be. So I got left behind. I got left behind in combat. It was me and a fucking Ukrainian, and this Ukrainian had like the oldest bolt action rifle I've ever seen. And so like, we're just trading some rounds with the Russians. I'm like, well, fuck, they left me, we're screwed. So at one point I just like sit down behind this wall and start smoking cigarettes as the BMP's shooting over top of me. And like, they're throwing grenades and shit. And I look at the Ukrainian and I was like, oh, what do we do? Do we go through the building? Because like, there's an apartment complex like 10 meters in front of us. And he was like, no, the door is probably locked. And I'm like, oh, fuck. So like we're basically stuck here. What ended up happening is we decided to basically shoot a bunch of rounds, and then we would crawl our way along this embankment to get to the next block. And then hopefully there wasn't Russians there to where we could run behind it. So we got to the end of this parking thing, and I'm like, man, we're gonna get fucking smoked on this run. And mind you, I don't really run. If you ask any of my other guys, I'm like, I despise running. Like, I hate it to the point where I typically won't do it. Like, if it's a small sprint, I'll do it, but I'm not quick at it. Obviously, I'm fat now too because I do more of the drone stuff. But at the time, I was smoking like a pack and a half of cigarettes. So like a 25, 50 meter sprint for me is like the thing when there's if there's a bear chasing you, don't be the slowest guy. I was the slowest I was definitely going to be the slowest guy on this. So I'm thinking like,
very dangerous over short distances.
Yeah. Like, I'm thinking like, when this Ukrainian's like 145 pounds soaking wet, like, you can tell he's like, I'm like, I'm going to get, like, he's going to take off. We're going to both take off running. And I'm going to be the one that's in the middle of the road as he makes it to this apartment. I'm like, I'm so fucked. Luckily, we both sprint, and we get like just around the corner, and there's some Ukrainians there. We scared them, they scared us. And once they realized we were Ukrainians, and like we thought we were somewhat safe, we stopped and we're smoking at the edge of these, like if this is the corner, we're like 10 meters set back from it. So like, we can't get hit directly, and the Ukrainians are on the other side of the street. And what ended up happening is we're sitting there talking, and a BMP somehow managed to shoot down the edge of this road. They hit the edge of this building with like the wall with a 30 mil and just smashed this dude's face off, like just obliterated it. And I was like, fuck. So we all ended up leaving. The Ukrainians, we drugged this, dead Ukrainian around the backside of the building. And then they were like, we'll come back and get him. Let's go regroup. So now it's myself and a bunch of Ukrainians that don't speak English. I'm wandering around Irpin for like an hour and a half, wondering what the fuck we're doing. And at one point, we go through this backyard, and all of a sudden over the wall hops one of my guys. I'm like, what the fuck? And they're like, dude, you're alive. And then another guy hops over and I'm like, where the fuck have you guys been? They had gotten stuck on the other part of the town, like 4 blocks away. They weren't able to come back. Another foreign team had got bogged down in an apartment complex. But yeah, they're like, dude, we thought you died. And I was like, no, you basically left me. But, and like, it's what it is. I also got left on position in Moshun. So that was like the second time I got left behind, but not on purpose. It happens. So we fought there for a few more days. And at that point, one of the Ukrainians that I had hooked up with at the start of the invasion, his name's Ivan. He was killed in Severodonetsk. He was with a group called Aerorozvidka. And he was messaging me on Signal saying, hey, leave the Legion and like join us. We're doing operations in the woods near Ivankiv. Ivankiv at that point was under Russian control. It's that highway of death where they got stuck at. But what the Ukrainians had done is they went through the old logging forest and got behind them and were using drones to like hit the Russians on the road. So I was like, fuck, that sounds sweet. I don't have to deal with dumb foreigners back at the hotel. Like the guys I were with were good. But like some of these other foreigners that were coming in were just like not the type you wanted to go to combat with. So I ended up leaving. I told my commander, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go with these guys. And he was like, no, you're not. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go with them. And like, so they showed up and I left my weapon at the hotel. And then I just like literally hopped in this vehicle and we ended up over in like northwestern Ukraine up in a place called Bazar. And basically we're going through the forest up towards like the exclusion zone, bombing Russians with drones. It was the first month in Ukraine was interesting to say the least.
Yeah. And how did it, that's still kind of like, I guess, the early days of how this all evolved. What were those operations like and how were they using drones at that time?
So when I was in Iraq, people need to understand drones were used in the fight against ISIS. ISIS wasn't doing like bomber drones. They weren't doing a lot of kamikaze, but they would throw up these like cheap Chinese things at the front lines, especially near like Mosul, Telskov, Telfar. And basically they would use them for ISR and then they'd try to lob mortars at the forces. So like drones weren't new to me, but how the Ukrainians were doing it was definitely new. I had never seen how they put the little grenade on the DJI. And like at that point I started learning like, okay, cool. Like, and like, this is all like pre-integrated system. So like what you would have is you'd have your Ukrainian with like the DJI controller and they would be piloting it and you'd have a guy on the radio overlooking the shoulder, saying, hey, radioing to the other Ukrainian units saying, hey, this is where they're at. Nobody had your flip down phone, where you can view your drone streams. It was all over radio comms. And you had to be pretty confident that the Ukrainian guy on the other line was like with the drone was giving the right directions. Cause otherwise, he's going to lead you directly into a Russian ambush and you're fucked. It was pretty, it was pretty basic compared to now. But for me, seeing it for the first time, I was just like, holy fuck. Like you can drop a grenade on somebody from 8 kilometers away. I was like, what in the fuck is this? And it was accurate. Like the Aerorozvidka guys had started doing drone, like DJI drone stuff, I think in 2016, I think is when they were initially formed, maybe 2015. And they had been like early adopters of utilizing drones as much as possible. It never really took on in the Ukrainian side initially because they were like, oh, this is like, it's not a military thing. It's, you're using a commercial drone. Cool. You can see stuff, but like, we don't need that. We have forward observers or, like it wasn't fully recognized by the Ukrainians on why it was needed. They were like, drones are like these big Q9 Reaper systems. It's not like everyone at the squad level should have an ISR drone. And then they also had So that was the first. So we had gotten some 40 millimeter rounds, and I met one of the engineers, and they're like, "Hey, like, do you know how to take this apart?" And I was like, we don't take apart munitions in the U.S. military. It's like not allowed." So I kid you not, I watched these guys get on Google, and they found a 40 millimeter like patent that showed like the whole system as it was like assembled. And then they also Googled like a 40 millimeter, like your M320. They also or it was the Mark 19 round, or no, it was the M320s. But they also, no, excuse me, it was Mark 19 at that time. They also Googled like a photo cutaway of it. So like these engineers were basically like, okay, so we can cut into the bottom of this explosive and it shouldn't blow up on us. And then once we cut into it, we can then, pipe wrench it apart and try to figure out how the safety works. So I kid you not, the first people that started dropping 40 mil frag grenades were this Aerosvidka group, and they did it. They learned how to do it by looking at like a Google image where the munition's cut in half, and like a fucking patent from 1962 or something. And like that's how they learned. And they did it in a room with like 7 or 8 other people. Like it wasn't like there was no safety on it. There was no like any of this. And like once they figured it out, they're like, okay, cool. So they showed me how to do it, and then I started doing it for them. But like then they brought up it's called a R18, which was like the very first. It's basically an agricultural drone that they had modified to drop mortars or large explosives from. So like I went from like seeing DJIs being used, and now it's like, hey, look at this. We're gonna drop a mortar, like an 81 mortar, on these guys from like 8 kilometers away. They're not gonna fucking expect it. We can like do whatever the hell we want repeatedly. And like my mind at that point was like, holy fuck, drones are sweet. Sadly, so I did that probably till April timeframe, and then I went and rejoined a group of the Legion guys, my old group, because like at the time I thought drones were cool, but I was also like, I'm here to shoot people in the face. Like I don't want to stare at a screen. I want to go do direct action. I want to go do assaults, recon by fire. So I went back and joined my unit, and we did some more operations around the Kyiv area. And then we ended up down in Mykolaiv. And in Mykolaiv, the Russians were near Ochakiv. They hadn't gotten pushed back out of like the Kherson region yet. So a lot of our operations down there was like, hey, here's a javelin. We're going to drop you off in this village. You guys will move 2 or 3 kilometers forward, find the Russian armor, and then smoke the shit out of it with javelins. We did that quite effectively, quite often. And then at some point, it went from, okay, you're doing, destroying armor. Like, what do you guys think about boat operations? And obviously, the Navy SEAL guy with us was like, this is what I trained my whole life to do. This is what I do. And like we had a South Korean Marine or former SOF guy too. And so everyone was like, yeah, we could do boat operations. So the goal was basically to get on these rapid inflatable, like a rib. And basically we would drive the boat or pilot the boat from our area southwest of Mykolaiv on the coast. We were going to take a boat all the way over into Kherson, and then like further south of Kherson, and basically do like sabotage operations. The operations once we got to land was amazing. The boat side of things, I will never do a boat operation again in my life. Absolutely fucking terrible. Like I was never naval anything, so like I always, you see the movies and you see the guys driving up quick in the boats and they hop off and blah blah blah, shoot people, and like it looks cool, and like even in like the recruitment videos it looks cool, but driving a rib or being on a rib
choppy
going through
water.
a fucking dude, yeah, like it's up and down. Like it was fucking terrible. It's cold. You get wet, like you can't stay dry. So like by the time we got to the fucking shoreline, and it's like a 6 hour fucking boat ride across the Black Sea, you know. Like number one, like I was like, oh well, it'll be like an hour boat ride because the boats are quick and you know, it'll be nothing. It'll be fine. It was the worst experience of my life to be like I don't know why anyone wants to be a Navy SEAL. Quite honestly, like any dealing anything with combat water and driving a fucking inflated boat across an ocean, let alone a sea or something, like I honestly do not understand why anyone would volunteer for that.
What were
It was
those
terrible.
what were those ops like through like infiltrations? This is like behind enemy lines type stuff.
Yeah, so like Ukraine had I don't know what you want to call them. Like they had like stay behinders, like people who
Yeah,
literally
partisans.
either got yeah. So like and like initially, I don't think it was like, hey, we're partisans, we volunteer to stay behind. I honestly like the Ukrainians make it sound that way, but like in the early days of the war, it was more of we were unable to get the fuck out of the area before the Russians took over. We're now hiding and we're working with like our local families while we hide. Like they'll go out at night or when they think it's clear, and then they'll say, hey, you know, Russians are moving into this area. There's artillery over here. But it wasn't, I don't, there might have been some like partisan stay behind soft guys at the very start, but I think a lot of it in Kyrgyzstan, um, and some of these other areas, it was more of a the Russians got in there so quick because the lines collapsed in certain parts so quick that it was like just the guys were stuck there. They still wanted to fight. They knew that if they surrendered, they would get, you know, more than likely disappeared or they would never see their family again. So it was like, okay, they'll fight. So we got a lot of good intelligence, and like there's still some of these areas that it happens in. Um, it's less likely to see it in areas now though, because like when the front lines move, every village that was where that front line was is pretty much destroyed. At the start of the war, Russians were able to get into some areas where like your infrastructure is still in place. So you still, if you didn't have running water, you had electricity still. You still had cell coverage usually. Like it wasn't like a fucking wasteland because there was no like high intensity fighting. But like these operations was basically the Ukrainians. We partnered with some Ukrainian soft guys from like the 73rd Naval Regiment. It was basically, hey, we're gonna take this bigger boat and then we're gonna go over to this area. We need you guys to get on these inflated boats, and we'll tow you out like like a half a kilometer, and then from there you got to drive yourself because we're not going to go that way. Um, and then basically they're like, you need to go. You'll land at this point. Somebody said it was clear here. There's no mines. There's no Russians within, 2 kilometers. But you need to be quiet. You need to be quick, and you need to get into cover once you land. And like basically the Navy SEAL guys. So like the Navy SEAL and then the Korean SEAL basically did the whole op order planning for it. They briefed us on roughly how it would look. Didn't really tell us how fucked the boat rides would be, but like I don't blame them for that because we probably been like, get fucked, we're not doing that. But like we tried to plan it as much as possible internally, but like the Ukrainian side was basically like, here's your objective, just go fucking do it. Radio when you're done, and we'll come pick you up, or message on Signal when you're done. Um, Initially, it was like a 20-kilometer movement that they wanted us to cover. I think it was basically get dropped off on this western shore, and then you're going to do a patrol all the way through this part of the area to this village. And then when you get to the village, you'll see, estimate how many Russians are there. If you estimate that you can take it, take the village, kill the Russians, take it over, and then either leave or we'll send more guys in. We never got to that point. So I think this was actually in May, maybe it might have been June when we started these actually. But the Ukrainians didn't tell us this peninsula is apparently like, so Kherson, especially near the Black Sea and then some other parts of Crimea, is basically like the mosquito haven of Ukraine. So it's like, you know how everyone jokes in Minnesota how the mosquitoes are like
Yeah,
the size of
a bird.
birds. So they dropped us on this in this fucking area, and I kid you not, there's like swamps around, and like it's just fucking miserable. If you dig, you dig into water because again, it's like it's like below the water table in certain areas. So like you can't really dig in anywhere. There's mosquitoes everywhere. We actually had to literally one of our medics had to keep giving guy like injections of Benadryl because he swelled up so much from mosquitoes. I didn't find it that much of an issue, but like I just have a high tolerance for living in the shit, I guess. After being in Iraq for like 4.5 years, it takes a lot to really be like, this is a shitty living situation. Like, I mean, we lived in a tent on top of a fucking mountain range. Like, nothing gets worse than that. And like, so like, I didn't really care about the mosquitoes too much. I cared more that that boat ride was horrendous and I was fucking wet. Like, I didn't pack an extra uniform. I didn't pack. I packed like 2 pairs of socks, and then a lot of guys loaded up with like MREs. I had like, I packed meat and cheese, which I was happy about, but like nobody was like, hey, you should try to like wrap an extra set of uniform in like plastic bag or something because you're gonna get fucking soaked. So like I'm all pissed off because I'm soaked in salt water. Nothing's drying out because it's fucking summer and it's humid. So like I was not in a very good mood. So like mosquitoes were the least of my problems. So we got there and then we started doing night movements, and it quickly became apparent that some people, like the non-soft guys that we had with us, were just eating a bag of dicks. Some guys were like misestimated the amount of water that they needed. Like I brought like 3 liters. That's usually my loadout anytime I go, whether it's 7-day operation or 2 days. Like I just bring 3 liters of water. If I need more, I'll figure it out. Dig a hole, drink that, whatever. I wasn't having too much of an issue with it. I had more of an issue that, again, I was fucking wet and miserable. But like we had some guys that were like running out of water really quick. So we got our first night movement. I think we got like 4 or 5 kilometers in, and like the SEAL guy and the soft guys were like, "All right, we have got to get a resupply, otherwise we're fucked." So luckily, the Ukrainians they organized a resupply, and one of the Navy SEAL guy Dan basically scouted, like him and one other fucking guy went and scouted like 3 kilometers of shoreline, found a good shoreline where like the boat can basically they can cut their engine and they can drift in so they don't alert. Because like if you drive your boat all the way up, you can hear a boat engine for quite a ways on a shoreline. So they had found like a little alcove to where the boat can get in, they can offload supplies, and then he was able to like walk the boat back out to a far enough point to where then like they could either row and get out past the waves or they could start their engine. But like if we wouldn't have had those guys, we probably would have been fucked. Like, I mean, it was just a shit show. But so we get resupplied. We bury the extra food and water, which is probably still buried somewhere on that fucking beach. And then we continue on. So the second night, we had some more issues with guys and some physical fitness. I was sucking ass because like I was still wet and like getting rash. Like, I mean, like you can't dry your boots. I was wearing like at that point, I still had like your thick ass leather boot, like the ones that they don't dry out ever.
Yeah.
And so like my feet are fucked. I was being a little whiny bitch. Some other guys are being whiny bitches. So we found a wood line, and again, nobody has night vision and nobody's going to turn a fucking light on. So we camp out in this wood line, just make, a 360 everything. The sun starts coming up in the morning, and I think I actually sent you some of the photos of these. If not, I can send you some. But funny enough, we ended up camping out in a Russian position. Luckily, there were no Russians there, but like it's where they had, you could tell where they dug the positions to like hold down your BMPs. There was fighting positions for infantry, and like none of us in the nighttime stumbled into any of these positions. We just like literally camped out in the middle of this like brigade size, like there was fucking hundreds of fighting positions in this area, and like we just camped out there. Nobody realized it. Luckily, there were no Russians there. Otherwise, we probably would have died. So we ended up going to one of these villages. We spotted some Russian infantry and some Russian military. So I had brought explosives with me, as well as like a battery, electrical wire. So we basically made some IEDs, buried them out in this road, and then we set up an ambush. We waited there for, we waited in this spot for like 10 hours. We were like, yeah, we're going to fuck these guys up. And not a single Russian drove down that goddamn fucking road. There was some Ukrainians that got engaged a little bit away from us. They took some captives, but like our team didn't get fired at. We didn't have a chance to shoot at anyone. And this is like a 7-day operation. So we get back to these boats or to like the drop off point or the exfil point. And like guys are pretty pissed off at this point because we did all this, didn't get to shoot anyone, didn't even get engaged. Like we had artillery and like grad rockets, but like it was nothing to write home about. And like when we started this, a majority of us that had never done boat operations were like, fuck yeah, this is going to be the best thing in the world. We're going to finally get to experience amphibious landing. And like, it was not what we expected. And so like we're getting exfilled. Our morale is pretty fucked. We throw everything in these boats and we start leaving to go back to our shore. And maybe like an hour after driving the boats into the Black Sea, we start running into problems. The Ukrainians that came to pick us up in their lovely infinite wisdom or accidental fuckery, when we loaded back up everything, one of them had pulled the bilge plug out of one of the boats. So in the middle of the Black Sea, we have a boat filling with water. Nobody can figure out why. It's pitch black. There's no night vision. And like when I mean filling with water, like if you're sitting down in the rib, it was like up to your knees, like it was sinking. And I think at this point we're like 4 kilometers from the Ukrainian shore, and now we're drifting back towards the Russians. So we're like, okay, we weren't drifting back yet. So we're like, okay, we'll be able to make it to shore because the boat shouldn't fully sink. It'll just be an extremely, painful next hour and a half because we're going to be really wet. And then we ran into a problem with our other boat. The boat that wasn't sinking ran out of fuel. When the Ukrainians left, they didn't fill up the fuel in one of the boats. So they drove a boat that was like half full of fuel. So now we have one boat out of fuel, one boat half sinking. It's just a clusterfuck. So the SEAL guy we like pull up to the other boat with the SEAL guy driving it. And then like they do their little knot thing so the boats are like sandwiched together tight. And like they're like, okay, let's try to radio for help, or we'll try to get them on signal. They're trying to figure out where we're at in the big ass sea. And then the Ukrainians on the shoreline are like, we can't come get you. Figure it out while we try to unfuck things to get a boat out to you. So at one point, and like at this point, the one rib that was filling with water, it was actually like it was starting. We had so much shit in there, and we had like 10 people in it. Like it was overloaded. So then we started throwing stuff out of the boat into the water to lighten the load, like the NLAWs we had with us and some of the other rockets. And then we had guys ditching their gear into the other boat just to try to get it back up higher. And at one point, like one of the guys in the boat is like so scared that he's going to drown, that he's like having panic attacks. The Navy SEAL guy, SEAL Dan, was like, hey man, if we strip down our kit, we can swim to shore. And like, everyone's like, that's not a bad idea. But then somebody asked him, he's like, what? They were like, what's your longest combat swim? Or like, what's your longest swim ever, whatever. And I don't remember what he said. It was like 2 kilometers or something, but it was like much shorter than where we're at. And like, I look over at one of the other guys, is Dakota. And I look at Dakota, and I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to swim 100 meters, let alone, 4 or whatever kilometers we were. I was like, look, I will just sit on this boat, and if we sink, we sink. If we get to the Russian shoreline, because I'm thinking, like, if everyone jumps off this boat and starts swimming, the boat will come back up a little bit because there's no weight on it, and ribs are not supposed to sink, right? So I was like, go ahead, you guys can jump off and fuck off to the shoreline. I'll drift my ass to the Russian shoreline, and we'll figure it out from there. I would say we were probably within minutes from guys doing that. And like the Navy SEAL guy is like, oh guys, this is no problem. Like we can do this. Like just follow me. And I'm like, fuck man, you're psychotic. Like I absolutely hate boat operations. Like at that point in my life, I was just like, we are so fucked. Like this guy's nuts. He'll be the only survivor. Everyone else of us is either going to end up on the Russian shoreline fighting or drowning in seawater. And like the SEAL guy, I'm not joking. Like when I say he was pumped to actually attempt this, he was like full on like, I can fucking do this. You guys can fucking do this. He wasn't saying like, yeah, you're fat, you're going to fail, or like, you don't know how to swim, so you're going to die. He's like, oh, well, I'll make it, guys. And I'm like, man, like, we're not going to make that. Like, sorry, like, you're positive because, like, again, you're psychotic and you're like, you're good at this. But none of us, I don't think I've ever swam a kilometer in my life straight, honestly. Like, I've swam in like a pool, which is
yeah.
25 meters, or what's an Olympic pool, 50 meters? And like this guy's like, you can swim 4 kilometers in like a cold water environment at night. It was like after doing 7 days of being a complete shit show and being tired, I was like, I'm not going to do that. But luckily, right as I think our SEAL guy was going to talk us into this, the Ukrainian that was with us got word from the command that they were sending a boat out. And so now the whole argument was, how is the Ukrainians going to find us? And it was like, okay, when we hear an engine, we'll start yelling, because nobody wanted to white light in the middle of the Black Sea in case there's, whatever drones were close to a shoreline, somebody's going to shoot at us. The boat got close to us. We're yelling. They can't figure out where we are. So at one point, so on this operation, I brought out 12 RPGs, RPG tube, and a pistol. I didn't bring a rifle. I was like, I didn't want to carry a rifle. I was like, I'm just going to shoot RPGs at shit, and if I need to, I have a pistol. So the boat that we're yelling at can't figure out where we are. So I was like, I got an idea. So I pull out my little Makarov, and I just like started shooting it up in the air. And luckily they ended up getting to us. But like, we had to get, they also forgot fuel. So the one boat that had fuel, the one boat that had fuel, we offloaded the fuel into the non-sinking boat that was out of fuel. And then we got fucking towed all the way back in on like a half sunk boat. Like it was the only time I will ever get on a boat for any type of operation ever again. I don't know what drives people to be Navy SEALs, but like all the props in the world, never again. No. Like,
You were pretty much done with MAR ops after that.
yeah, like my whole infatuation with like amphibious landings and sneaky boat operations pretty much died that night. Like I never again. I actually haven't been on a boat since, to be quite honest. Like I don't even go swimming anymore. Like my Ukrainian wife, like we'll go to like a spa or something on vacation when we get a chance, and she's like, get in the water. I'm like, no, I'll sit on the fucking lawn chair and watch you swim. Like I have no I just have no ambition to get in fucking water anymore. Like, honestly, call it PTSD, whatever. But like, I'm good. I don't want any. I'm not going around water anymore. Like,
So from there, it sounds like you ingratiated yourself with the local culture and also got more into the drone side of things. What was sort of like the next couple years like?
so I ended up leaving. So so by August, so after the boat operations, I ended up leaving the Legion, and my guys continued on into, like, the unit I was with continued on into Severodonetsk, and then Bakhmut and some other stuff. Whereas I transitioned over into back doing just like some drone stuff, to be quite honest. Um, at that point in the war, you could start to see that it was going to, like, the Russians were still obviously pushing areas, but it was turning into more of a static line defense type stuff. But I honestly, I left that unit because that boat op, I was just, they were going to keep doing them. And I was like, I'm over it. So I went back and started doing drone operations. I did drone operations probably till November of 2022. And then I ended up in Kharkiv with some more foreigners. There was a few Swedish guys, some other Americans, and basically up there we started helping out with the Kharkiv counteroffensive. We did some training with some Ukrainian units, and then while we were up there, one of my Ukrainian friends, who's an officer, call signs Lev, was like, "Hey, we're starting up a assault unit, like Western maneuver warfare, Humvees, infantry fighting vehicles. We'll do it by like the Western standard and not by the Ukrainian standard." Because at that point in 2022, the Ukrainians still they weren't getting trained on like NATO standards. So it was like, okay, let's try it. So I ended up back in Yavoriv with a bunch of people since the first time in the war. The buildings are all blown up. So this is when like Chosen Company, the unit I ran for the last 4 years, became a thing. We got to Yavoriv. There was another Swedish unit that was already there, and they're like, "Hey, we're 312 company or team or squad." And I was like, "Hey, I'm Ryan." And like we basically decided to like build out like an infantry assault unit styled after like, utilizing initiative and then like basically pushing versus like the Ukrainian style. So at that point in time, when Ukrainians would take fire from the enemy, they would just stop, and like all your initiative, all your momentum, and all your advantages, they like it would just dead end, and like they wouldn't know how to like okay, if we get shot at, your machine gun lays down fire, and then you have your swooping maneuver, like your flanking maneuver. They didn't do that. They didn't do that at that point in time. Most units, when they took contact, everyone would get on the ground. They might shoot a couple rounds, and then they would pull back, or they would all try to move at once. So we trained in Yavoriv for a little while. Some guys went and explored other areas of the front line while some guys were in training. And then I think it was March of 2023, at that point in time, up in Chernihiv and Sumy in the north, they were having a lot of issue with Russian infiltration, like the DRG teams. So like your Russian soft, but like at that point in time, it was like your soft units, your VDV, and some of even your regular army. It wasn't all like Spetsnaz. It was just basically there was holes that they were able to cross into the Ukrainian side, and they'd get like 10 kilometers deep. They'd set up an ambush and they'd kill a bunch of Ukrainians. So we got told to go up there to the north and basically see what we can do to either, prevent these or help solidify the Ukrainians to where like we can figure out why they keep getting through. We linked up with, I think it was the 1st Tank Brigade or 1st Tank Battalion. And like we started helping them out. We quickly got bored of, walking through forests, doing recon, because at this point, we're not near the Russian border. So we're up in a place called Semenivka. It's like 25 kilometers from the Russian border, 20-minute drive. And so we're basically fucking around in these woods for no reason, because 98% of the time, no one's here. And Ukrainians are moving around now. So, guys' attitudes are getting bad. We're trying to keep it in check. But one day up there, a DRG team got into the Ukrainian side, ended up killing 25 or 30 Ukrainians. They called in some missile strikes, killing even more. And then they ended up hitting the town of Semenivka. At that point, the Ukrainians there were like, hey, can you come out and figure out, within an hour of this all happening, they called us and said, hey, figure out where these guys are or where they went, because there's no way they crossed the border. So they had to walk in. So we went out there, looked at all the blown up Ukrainian vehicles, all the bodies and shit that are still laying everywhere. Because again, this happened within an hour. And so we found the trail that they had broke through to get to where they set their ambush. So we started looking around the area and almost stepped on a Palm 2 landmine because they had set some stuff out so we couldn't follow them. Anyway, nobody got hurt there, luckily. And what we ended up doing is tracking these guys all the way back to the border, basically. We got within 500 meters of the border before I was finally hey, we're stopping here. It's getting dark, number one. Number two, we're in 2023, nobody was patrolling the border on the Ukrainian side in certain areas. It was basically they're not crossing, so we're not going to. If you put guys within 2 kilometers of the border, the Russians will just shell the shit out of it. So the Ukrainians, it was basically a giant gray area of 10 to 15 kilometers. Once in a while, Ukrainian units would go fuck around in there and then they'd come back. But nobody was really holding down your frontal area. So we were really far out in front of the Ukrainians. So at that point, I was all right, we're calling it quits. Let's go back to base, and then we'll pick up where we left off tomorrow. So we get back, shower, everything, build a game plan out for the next morning. 8 of us are going to go on it, and then we'll have a reserves team. So we ended up walking all the way to the border, and I think I might not, but I'll send you a photo of it. We get to the border, and there's the Ukrainian border signs that say, hey, Russian territory, and it's all in Ukrainian. And we're fuck, let's go take a picture next to it like a bunch of retards. So instead of being we lost all military bearing, go up, take pictures next to these signs, and then someone's hey, we're not getting shot at. So if no one's shooting at us, nobody's really here either on the Russian side. So at that point, the terrorism light bulb in my head sort of went off, and it was well, let's cross the border. So we take all our photos, and then we took some of the border signs and then moved them into Russia a little bit. Haha, we moved the border. And then we took a couple of them back to Semenivka. We stole some border signs. But so then the next morning I was hey, we approached our command saying, hey, we can cross the border here. Our command was absolutely not. You're not doing any of that. The only thing we heard was, just don't tell us what you're doing type deal. So we formed a plan basically to cross about 10 kilometers into Bryansk Oblast and set up an ambush on one of the main MSR roads. That because we could fly a DJI on the border and we could see where they're moving traffic all the time. And the Russians weren't going north and then around. They were taking a road within 10 kilometers of the border. So we could move through these wood lines and get to this border. The Ukrainians had a map of where the Russian minefields were. So we had to clear through about a kilometer of mines on the Russian side of the border. And then we would basically be scot-free in the woods to do whatever we wanted. So what we decided to do to make sure there weren't Russians is we ended up bringing, jerry cans, the ones on the vehicle.
Gasoline, yeah.
Well, we did it. Yep. So we packed in 3 or 4 jerry cans repeatedly closer to the border. Then we'd go back, sleep. And we did this for like 7 days until we moved like 20 or 30 liters of diesel fuel, plus food, plus water, plus ammo, and had even dug positions at the border, like bunkers. And what we ended up doing is basically going into the Russian territory, and basically starting fires at the border. And then we would pull back and go hide in our little bunkers and wait out to see what would happen. What ended up happening is the fires would, because there was no fire break and because the forests weren't managed on the border for so long, there was so much kindling and tinder. We basically lit half of like southeastern Bryansk and parts of Ukraine. Like I'll send you, like we had a whole area that was like on fire for like a week straight. And it was like we were walking through like the smoke and stuff. But the interesting thing was, and this wasn't something that we like planned for, but like the minefields that the Russians had laid were new enough that when the fire went over the area, it would set off the anti-tank mines first off. But secondly, where the anti-personnel mines were, in a lot of areas it left a divot, like it sucked the earth down because it pulled the oxygen out. So it was like, aha, like we can actually like get through this minefield. So we went and grabbed I think it's a Valon minesweeper. And basically I was like, look, I'll take point. And I just basically was like walking point for like 2 days, marking these paths through this minefield. And what we did on the Ukrainian side, we had marked it with blue paint. And then on the Russian side, we tied ribbons. So like if you're facing Russia, you won't see the paint. If you're from Russia facing Ukraine, if you're not paying attention, you might just see some trash hanging from the trees. So we did like a left and right limits. Anything in between that's clear. If you step off the path, you're probably going to blow yourself up. So we cleared this minefield, probably not like the whole minefield, but we cleared a path through it probably within a day and a half. And then we went back and then we built out, we found like our little ambush spot next to the road, 10 kilometers deep into Russia. We realized that there was literally no one was defending it. Like they weren't expecting anyone to cross the border and, ambush a bunch of Russian infantry guys on the road or whatever. So we ended up going back to our little like base of operations area. We built out an op order. Basically what we were going to do is we would do like a offensive action and then like defense retrograde. So we prepared multiple positions. We would prepare multiple positions. So we'd initiate the ambush. We'd fall back 100 meters. When they would come and investigate, we would hit them again and then keep doing that all the way until we got back to the Ukrainian border. It was probably like every 500 to 1,000 meters, not like 100. So basically we had like 7 or 8 like fallback positions where there was more ammo, more rockets. We brought a bunch of OZM mines with us, claymores. And basically the whole goal was like to see how far we could suck these idiots in repeatedly. It didn't work out that way. So we ended up, the day of the like ambush, we brought pink spray paint with us. And after we would cross each blue mark on each tree line that we did or each thing, on the Russian side, we would spray paint hot pink. So that way, when we're retreating back, instead of looking for ribbons in different areas, it's like eye level. You see 2 hot pink lines, stay between it. Number one. Number two, the other thing was every so often we would have the OZM mines placed. So the last person that runs through a certain area, bend over, pull your pin out of the OZM so they arm. It was a great idea if it would have worked effectively. The problem is, so we ambushed the Russians, and I got video of it. We hit a blacked out lot of Neva. But before that, we sat at like within 5 meters of the edge of this fucking road for 3 hours. And like you would have civilian traffic. There was even like a babushka that drove by on a bicycle. Luckily, they didn't see us. And like at that point, it's like, fuck, how are we going to, like there were some police vehicles that drove past too, but it was like, we're not there to kill the police. It's like, we want to get like army, like people in fucking camouflage uniforms. So at a certain point, I was like, I have an idea. Like we had RPG-7s with us. I was like, I'll go put a fucking rocket out in the middle of the road, and I guarantee you someone's going to stop to pick this up. We had an Estonian guy with us. His just call him T. He was like, "That is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. It's not going to work. They're just going to drive past it." I kid you not. I got out there, put the RPG down, and like slid it like a retard, slow crawling in the road. Slid it, ran back to position. I kid you not. Within 5 minutes, there's a blacked out lot of Neva coming down this road, and like they slam on the brakes, and they sit there for like 2 or 3 minutes, like looking at it, like not getting out of the vehicle. Like it just sits there, and I'm like, okay, like we can't shoot yet because we can't see who's inside. It could be a bunch of civilians for all we know. And I was like, fuck, I hope it's not because I don't want them to pick up the fucking RPG. Luckily, the passenger side guy opens the door and he goes to get out of the vehicle, and you can just see a multicam uniform. And it was like, okay, game on. And like what was to initiate the ambush is I was going to shoot the first rocket. So he goes to get out, turns straight towards me, and I'm like, fuck, he definitely sees me. So I grab my AK and I just stand up and just full auto into this fucking truck from like 10 meters away at max. And at that point, everyone else in the unit, everyone else on that ambush line was told basically, once contact's initiated, shoot one rocket at whatever we're shooting at. So you just have like 8 fucking rockets come flying out of the trees and just obliterate this fucking car. Somehow the driver managed to get out of the vehicle, and he tried to run. He got around to the front end of the vehicle, and he was like injured already, but he tried to run, and one of my guys just fucking smoked him, just dropped him. And so like we're just unloading on this vehicle for like 5 minutes, and at some point I'm like, okay, ceasefire, let's fall back, thinking that, hey, we created a big enough disturbance that the Russians are going to come in and QRF. So we fall back to this position where we had a machine gunner set up, and then we had a couple other guys set up. We sat there for probably 30, 40 minutes, and like we can still see a little bit of this road, and I'm like, where the fuck are the Russians? And like at this point, the Russians are lobbing artillery into Ukraine, and like they're hitting stuff super far behind us. And so we were probably there for like 45 minutes to an hour. And at that point, I was like, okay, they're not going to follow us. So like we fell back to the next position, waited for like 10 minutes. And like at that point, everyone's losing military discipline. We're smoking cigarettes, laughing. And so my second in command, T, the Estonian, was like, okay, we're calling the op before we all get, before we end up doing something stupid and getting caught by someone unexpectedly. So as we walk back through our little pink route, we pull the pins on the mines, thinking, maybe later on they'll come down it. There was some GUR, like military intelligence guys that were also with us, because when we did the ambush, these guys were actually launching 50 cal machine gun fire at a military checkpoint within the city. So we all link back up. We go to cross the border, and we got maybe like 500 meters on the Ukrainian side, and then you start hearing the explosions in the woods behind us. Yeah. So like 3.5 hours after we just slaughtered a bunch of Russian military on this road, the Russians finally like did something about it, and they were dumb enough to go down a very obviously marked path and fucking tripped a bunch of mines and stuff. So we get back on the Ukrainian side, and we're walking back towards our vehicles that are in a little town near Lazova is what it was called. And so we get in our vehicles, we go to drive out, and someone starts shooting RPGs at us. The fucking Ukrainians that were guarding further away thought we were Russians, so that was a shit show. But we get back to base. Our command is like, where the fuck have you been? Like, what have you been doing? Because like the Russians at this point are like full on smashing the fucking border with everything. They brought tanks out, and they're like, where were you guys? And like at that point, it was like, hey, here's the video, idiots. Like we've been crossing the Russian border for the past like 10 days, and we just killed a bunch of Russians. And at first, like the command was upset about it, but then they're like, you have video of it. And I was like, yeah, we have video of it. And at that time, like 2 days later, the Russians had posted on their Telegram, we ended up actually ambushing 3 Ministry of Defense officials.
Holy shit.
That we killed. Yeah, so we thought we just killed some random retard military. It ended up being like 2 colonels and a major were in that lot of Neva heading to a meeting at like the town over. And we luckily, like, I'll send you, it's fucking hilarious. Like, they're like, oh, it was from a drone. And I was like, well, no, here's the video. Like, this is us. Like, we're the ones that actually killed your fucking officers. But like, we got very lucky that number one, because we didn't know that they had tanks like on the other side of that village. Like, we didn't even think about it. We got lucky. Number one, they didn't bring armor in. Number two, they took so long to get organized that we got all the way back on the Ukrainian side. Like, we got really lucky. It was a really risky thing because, again, there was like 12 of us at the time. It wasn't, and we had no reserves. There was no supporting element coming in because we didn't tell anyone where we were. Like, it was a not so bright idea that turned out in a positive manner, I guess you could say. Our Ukrainian leadership initially was pissed off until they got like the pat on the back saying, hey, good job for destroying. Like, they took all the credit, which is whatever. Like, we didn't do it for credit. It was just like, we found an opening and we took, we took the initiative to exploit what we saw. So like, we didn't really care about the awards. And again, like, we just thought we killed a bunch of random Russian infantry driving to their fucking base, After that, they were basically like, hey, if you want to cross the border, Ken, you can do it. I was like, well, it's not a smart idea because like we literally painted a pink line across the border on how to get through their minefield. If we cross that position again, we're going to get hit. So like we did some other operations there. After that, we helped the tank battalion get better positioned closer to the border so that they could actually defend against the DRG a little better. And like the rest of the deployment, we were there for like another month. And it was mainly like help out the Ukrainians at that point. We didn't cross the border anymore because like we thought that because of what we did, the Russians should have like put more stuff. Like they were going to be prepared next time. And like, honestly, I didn't want to be trying to probe through a minefield and get shot at. So we just said, fuck it. We didn't do any more cross-border stuff. We did some mortar operations, but largely we just like moved Ukrainians around into like new positions and then went and dug positions for them. So we ended up getting back to Yavriv after that deployment. Probably like 3 weeks later, the tank battalion commander, his call sign's Tankist, odd, like dumb nickname for a tank commander, but so Tankist messaged one of our Ukrainian speakers was like, hey, thank you for the help. Here's some of the results of like what you guys helped us do. They ended up capturing 2 DRG guys and like killing like 8 of them because they had moved a position actually at the border and caught them crossing. So like it was a decent operation. It was decent deployment. It was pretty slow pace from what guys wanted. So we got back to Yavriv, and at that point, half the unit was had deployed with us. The other half had been sitting in Yavriv for like 3 months, and like Yavriv is like it's like where you'd go if you just want your soul to die because like it's boring, like Ukrainian training isn't like go shoot ammo every day. It's like go yell bang bang every day.
Yeah,
so doing that for like 3 months when like the guys just wanted to fight and like they were at that point, some of them had been there for like 6 months. So like they were like gearing to like fight. So we get back, we talk with command. And so at this point, because I was deployed with guys, they had put another person who I didn't know in charge of the rest of my unit or my guys back in Yavriv, and the guy was a complete fucking retard. Canadian John, if you watch this, you can go fuck yourself. Same with you, British John. You're both faggots. But so we got back to Yavriv, and there was like a pretty big falling out with the Ukrainian leadership because of who they put in charge. Because they didn't ask anyone. They're like, this is who we're putting in charge. One of them was a former artillery officer that had his head so far up his ass, the Canadian. And the other one, while decent with infantry stuff, honestly had a very huge alcohol problem. And, there were times where he had gotten drunk on the military base, which you're not supposed to do, and had threatened people, gotten a fight with people. When I got back to Yavriv, it was like full on, like almost to the point of mutiny with the guys that were back there. So I ended up getting everyone in our big like company tent where everyone slept. I said, look, if you guys want to, we have an option to go to the 59th Brigade. The 59th Brigade is at that point was fairly well known. The brigade commander, I think he's a colonel now, Colonel Sukarevsky. He was one of the initial officers in 2014 that said, fuck the separatists. Like they fired the first shots against the separatists. It was his unit. They also defended the Luhansk airport, not the Donetsk one where cyborgs, that cyborg thing happened, but they defended another part. And then they took they did a lot of work at the start of the 2014 issue. So he was a fairly well-known commander, didn't put up with a lot of bullshit. And basically, like when I contacted him, he was like, look, if you want to do storm operations, like have at it, like more than welcome. If you're volunteering to like do frontal assaults, we'll let you do whatever the fuck you want. Like, perfect. We need that. So I got the guys around in the tent and I said, basically like, look, anyone with military experience, you're welcome to come. If you don't have military experience, sorry, we're not taking you. Because like what we wanted to do was literally, it's not something you don't want to bring guys without experience in, because when I say frontal assaults, like we basically said to the 59th Brigade, like we will do full on frontal assaults, whether it's through open fields or whatever. And our whole goal, if we were going to move to if we had enough people that wanted to move, our whole goal to move to the 59th was to basically show that you can build out a foreign contingent that can do, you could be the sledgehammer of a unit. So like when there's an issue, send in the foreigners, let us go fuck everything up. And then, we'll come out and then you guys can put your defenders back in. So we didn't take anyone without military experience, except for one guy. He was a Canadian Ukrainian. He spoke fluent Ukrainian, fluent English, and he also was extremely disciplined and he caught on quick. We took 3 foreigners, but 2 of them had deployed up north to us. So otherwise, the majority of the unit was all foreign. Obviously, everyone in the tent that was prior service was basically like, yeah, we'll join you. It was for a while known as Ryan's Rebellion, because we basically all went straight to the battalion headquarters, walked in his office, and I talk to them now, we're friends now. Basically, we had some choice words that were said, and basically said, you either cancel our contracts right now, or we're all just going to go AWOL to the 59th anyway. It probably, like hindsight, it probably should have been handled much more respectable than what happened, but it is what it is. So within a week of all of us basically rebelling against the command, we were on a bus heading to Pokrovsk, basically. And I think we might have overestimated ourselves a little bit at the beginning, but so we got there. Our battalion commander, his name was Kozak. He had been in command of the reconnaissance unit for the 59th Brigade for a while, was previously in the military before that as well. So he's had experience. We initially got there, and within we had contracts within 2 days, which is unheard of in Ukraine. And then we had weapons within 3 days. And after that, he was like, hey, you have 2 days of training for a trench assault, and then you're going on your first assault. So 5 days from signing a contract, it's Dovai, you're going to go do a frontal assault. We were like, okay, perfect, not a big deal. here's a list of equipment we want for the assault, like rockets, all this other dumb shit. And at that point, a lot of us hadn't done like a full-on trench assault, because most of the fighting in 2022 was, you know, CQB in urban environments, or it was like tree line to tree line. And like there wasn't always like in the east of Ukraine, because that's where the front line was, you had to actually like developed trench systems. So like you would have 50 to 70 meter long trenches. They would have bunkers in it. They would have firing positions. They would have wired radios into them. So like you actually had like full on trenches, where in the west, like north of Kyiv or even up in Sumy, a lot of those trenches were like, you know, knee deep trenches that were just hand dug. They weren't very good. So we go out to do this first operation. I think we called it Mars. It might have been. I don't know what I think it was Mars. So it's myself, Dave, and 4 other guys. So a 6-man group. And basically, we didn't plan this one. The Ukrainians did. We let them do it all however they wanted. We were going to infill on foot. So we got dropped off like 2 kilometers away, infilled the rest of the way through random trenches. And then like sometimes you'd have to sprint across open ground. We get to this trench line and we meet up with the Ukrainian that we're supposed to. His name's Cop. Cop is like, okay, like Kozak told you, tomorrow morning, we're going to bring some tanks up and some heavy machine guns. We're going to shoot at the Russians to your right. Like it was like a position that stuck out in between like a Russian position here, and then you had Ukrainian up here. But basically what they were going to do is they would pull the tanks up and the heavy machine guns, and they'd shoot at the Russians on our right flank. And then we were supposed to hop over top of the trench and run like 100 meters into machine gun fire to take the enemy trench. And like none of us at this point were like, no, like fuck it, let's do it. Let's see how it goes. We can handle it. So we get woke up in the morning like 5 a.m. Everyone preps their stuff. And what ended up happening is they pulled the tanks forward. And before this operation could even take off, it was just an absolute clusterfuck. The Russians on the right side had managed to get even further down. So now the trench that we were in, they could shoot RPGs and stuff straight down the trench line. It was just a total shit show. The command ended up saying, okay, everyone needs to fall back, like basically abandon the position. The assault's called off. We got stuck there for like 2 hours just getting our shit pushed in by the fucking Russians. None of us, I got hit in the face with some minor debris. So like we all tried to like crawl into like this one little fucking dugout, and like it was mainly meant for like 2 people, and we had like 6 guys crammed into this, and I'm at like the front of it, and like I'm inside, but like I'm not inside because there's not enough room. A mortar goes off right above on the other opposite side of the opening, and like I just get smashed in the face with rock and dirt. Fuck my eye up because I wasn't wearing eye pro because I'm a dumbass. Like wear eye pro, it'll save your eyes. But like, well, I'm mainly okay mine now. I have like 60% vision, but I also got hit later on in 2023 again in the eye, and that sort of fucked it more. But so we ended up getting exfilled. We get back to base, and like some of the guys that did that operation had never been in combat. So like we get back to base, and some of them are like, what in the fuck did we sign up for? But it wasn't in a bad way. It was just like one of the guys, like I had to tell Dave's going to get mad about this, but I don't know if you've ever heard about Chosen Company, Aussie Dave, the one that's always like screaming stuff when he's like in combat. Like when we were exfilling, we were getting shot at, and like you would hear it snap above your head, and like I would get down, and this kid had never been in combat before, and he's just standing there. I'm like, dude, like they're shooting at us. Like that noise is the round coming over top. Like you need to get down. Like they are directly shooting at you. And like he had never heard what it sounds like to be actually physically shot at. So he was fucking clueless on it. I think he was a little concussed too from all the fucking artillery, all the artillery rounds we ate. But like it was just like we got back to base and all the guys at base were like, yeah, did you guys like, did you like, was it successful? And we're like, man, like, no, we got fucking obliterated basically. Like they wiped the position off the map. Luckily, the command wasn't mad at us because it wasn't really like, it wasn't like they're the ones that told us to leave the position. So then they're like, Kozak comes up, he's like, okay, you have 2 more days. You're going to try another position. This time, we're not going to wait. Like once you go out there, you're just going to go. Like no wait overnight, just full on go. And so I basically told Ryder, who's a Ukrainian Israeli, I was like, okay, Ryder, tell him that if we're just going to launch an assault, let's just do it with the Humvees instead of getting dismounted, because we had mostly the 2-door Humvees. So like, you know, like your front's armored and then the whole back's open. And then we had 2 like gun truck Humvees that you can mount a 50 cal on or a Mark 19. So I basically told Ryder, I was like, look, tell him we're going to take 3 Humvees in. We'll have a gun truck in the front, and then we're just going to stack as many people in the open top Humvees as we can, and we're just going to fucking bum rush the position. Like, I want the Ukrainians to drop us off on top of the fucking enemy, like 5 meter, like as close as they can fucking drive. Like, we're just going to fucking pile out of these fucking Humvees directly into the Russian trench, like within 60 seconds in the trench. That video, I believe, is on YouTube. It went extremely well. We spent 2 days basically rehearsing like how to dismount out of a fucking open top Humvee, so that nobody would eat shit and people would like, if you're on the front right and you're on the front left of the back end, you know, like you're filtering out the doors and then you immediately cut down and start covering, but you have to get out of the path so people can keep going. So we rehearsed for 2 days. Operation went off flawlessly. The Russians just fucking didn't know what the fuck was going on. A majority of them tried to run away from the position, and unlucky for them, they literally ran out in front of our gun truck, and like our 50 cal machine gunner just ate lunch on them with like a whole fucking belt from like 30 meters away, just laid down religious hell on them. And like you can see it in the video where they try to scoot out, but like the rest of them fled in another direction, and anyone else in the trench, it was like done within like 10 minutes. Like we had taken the trench. So then they called out Ukrainians came out, and then we fucked off immediately out of the trench, back to our base camp. Command was like, holy fuck, it works. Can you guys do it again? And we're like, yeah, like as long as you give us the vehicles, we will drive. Like as long as you have the armored vehicles, we'll do the planning. Like give us what we need, tell us what the objective is. And as long as you drive us directly up to the front line into the position, we will storm it. No, it doesn't matter where out on the front line. Our next operation was basically to try to take back a village that they had lost, Pervomaysk. So this is like 8 kilometers from Donetsk city. So it's like at the it's been like a battleground. It was a battleground area up until March of 2024. So it held for 2 years, basically under constant attack. And actually in 2023, we were able to push the line even closer. At one point, a Ukrainian unit got within 800 meters of the Donetsk airport. So like the line got pushed back.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's fairly well known like that was going on, because like when all of these assault operations were happening, you had the southern offensive happening in Robotny, and then you had like the Bakhmut defensive happening. So like we were like this little, it was not like a sector-wide operation. It was like the 59th Brigade worked with like 1 or 2 other units, and it was like, hey, let's push our front as well. And we did decent work, honestly, for up until the Avdiivka counteroffensive. Then it turned into more of a, so we attacked Pervomaysk. We took back on our initial village attack, we cleared, well, so on Pervomaysk 1, the whole thing was basically clear every position up to what we called Objective Kiev. Objective Kiev had like a backyard pool, so it was fairly easy to figure out which building you were in. In reality, the command wanted us to clear every bunker on the way up. In reality, what we devised as a strategy, it was myself and he was sadly killed on the next operation, but Andrew Weber, he was a former, I think, officer in the 173rd. Our strategy was basically like, instead of stopping to engage each bunker on the way, we would basically run the gauntlet through the Russian positions. And then once we got to the objective, we would radio that we're at the objective, and then we'd send teams back to back clear the positions. Because like in these houses, they would sandbag the front of it, but they never had any fighting. Like once you got around behind them, they couldn't really defend the position because it's basically an open doorway. You can throw grenades in it. So we basically, it was sprint through or like move as quick as you can through this village. If you get engaged, engage and keep moving till you get to the objective. Once we got a foothold at the objective, then we'll send like 4-man teams backwards to back clear the Russian positions. That way they're not behind like sandbags. It's basically like a more even fight. Number one. Number two, again, like if you get in like with Erbil and Moshud and the other CQB environments, if you can hold the initiative and you can have like the violence of action, the Russians don't have good NCO core. So like they melt, like they don't understand what to do. And when you get intermixed in their lines, it makes it even harder for them to understand like what they should do. So it's like, for lack of a better example, like shooting school children, because like they just don't, like they're just like
Helpless.
they just stand there.
Yeah.
So we got to Objective Kiev, and like we didn't take a single contact. We were throwing grenades the whole way in like the basement, like the cellar basements from the blown up houses. We didn't get shot at a single round until we got to this objective. Once we got there, I pushed a 2-man team even further past the objective than what we realistically should have. And they got engaged from a house that had a bunker system in it and a tunnel. So they're fucked off engaging that. And anyway, we engaged this house for a little bit, and like the video's online with it, you'll see it. And then they come back, and then on our exfil, we basically back cleared all these positions, and not a single Russian in these other positions turned around and fired at us. They would hide in the fucking houses. Like we found a machine gun position where there was like 2 PKMs in it, and I went to reach in and grab the PKM and like start looting the fuck out of this building. And there's literally a Russian in a fetal position under the stairwell. So like I'm like, oh fuck! I lean back, grab a grenade, just chuck it around the corner and fucking chested him with it. Like they just didn't know what the fuck. They just didn't know what to do. Like they just lost all.
Yeah, they weren't trained soldiers.
All sense of anything. Yeah. I mean, it was like the Vostok battalion. Like some of them had experience, but like they just didn't have command and control. Like once they just didn't have. Nobody could tell them what to do. They didn't know what to do. They didn't. And like the Russian military, as well as the Ukrainian military, is really bad at like seizing the initiative or like, you know, making decisions without a commander. So like it was literally like fucking nothing. Like it was a piece of cake all the way back, just fucking slotting Russians. And it was probably like 800 meters we had to clear back through.
I mean, yeah, you spent a long time fighting. So tell us how that leads into where you are today.
Yeah, so so we did assault operations up until probably October of 2023. And at that point, the Avdiivka counteroffensive happened, and we were basically like the southern flank for Avdiivka. We got absolutely mauled by the Russians. So we were never set up. So we never trained for defensive operations, which is probably largely a failure on my part for never doing it. Our whole agreement with the 59th Brigade was always like, hey, we'll go out and do an assault. We will, get the foothold. We will kill everyone up to that position. And then we will radio in, and then you need to send Ukrainians within, 6 hours. If you don't, we're just going to fuck off out of that position. We're not here to defend it. We're here to kill everyone and make it so you can defend it. Like, basically, we were just there to assault. Like, we weren't going to defend anything. If we assaulted an objective, we took a foothold, and then we had to temporarily defend it because of a counter assault. That's fine. But like, we trained every day, 7 days a week on trench assault, CQB, dismount, getting in and out of vehicles, like nothing but assault actions. We never once trained for defense. And like, that's probably, as being a commander, that's like my fuck up, because what happened later on in 2023, because the lines were faltering and the Ukrainians were taking such high casualties, we basically got used as gap fillers. So the Ukrainians typically knew if we got into the fight, we would stay in the fight, and that's regardless of like we did one operation where we had 48 guys go out, -2. We had 2 killed on that operation, Andrew Weber and Lance Lawrence, and then 44 people got injured. Instead of retreating, we did like a retrograde defense where people basically fought their way back to the Ukrainian side. And then even after, we didn't actually pull out until the next morning. So we had guys with gunshot wounds, half their fucking calf muscle blown off, still gunning it out with the Russians. And that's like one operation. We had another operation where we lost another good soldier, Gimli. We assaulted a position, took that position, and then we realized that if we didn't take another position nearby, that if the Ukrainians came into this position, they would likely get overran. So we attempted to attack another position after we had just got done clearing 2 positions. Ultimately, we lost 1 soldier, Gimli, in that, and we had 6 or 7 guys severely wounded. But like, typically, like, the Ukrainians knew that if we got somewhere and there was a fight, we were going to stick it out and fight. It doesn't matter if it was like fucking 3 tanks driving through a field at us. Like, the guys, we don't run. It's just everyone knows, everyone's disciplined enough to listen to the team leader that's in that position to say, hey, you're either falling back or no, like, this is where we stand. This is where you stay. You're not leaving it. So like, we started getting used as the last ditch effort to prevent line collapses. We got repeatedly abused insofar as we would go out and take a position back from the Russians. They would move the Ukrainians in it, and then within hours we would get called back. Like, we cleared one position like fucking 8 times in one goddamn day. And instead of the upper sector command at the general staff level saying, hey, you have permission to just avoid holding that position anymore, they basically forced the 59th Brigade's hand, saying, no, you need to go get that position back. Like, the land is more important than your fucking lives. So we got pretty beat up from October, September, like October, November, December, January, February. So up until that point, we had basically lost like 3 guys, like, killed in action on assault. Everyone had been wounded. We had like a 90. We joke around that there was like a 98% injury rate, but we had like an 85% injury rate. If you went on an operation, if 10 people went out, 8 of you were coming back with a bullet hole or fragmentation. We had guys we had 1 soldier get shot in the leg, went to the hospital. 3 days later was back on an operation where we would just patch him up in the field if it started bleeding again. Like, it's just what we did. We did it for 7 months fucking straight. But once we started getting utilized for defensive measures, we started taking casualties fast. We lost 11 guys in 3 months. But again, like it was sort of I like the 59th Brigade in the command, so like I don't want to blame them because it wasn't them. It was above their pay grade level. But like we had this agreement where we would be the assault force, and then your Ukrainians would defend it. We were perfectly fine, re-clearing positions when it made sense. When it tactically made sense to like hold that position, it made, we would do it. But like we would go out to positions that were like a dick out in the middle of 3 other Russian positions surrounding it. So that sort of grinded my gears for quite a while because we lost some good men for no fucking reason other than somebody at the general staff level having their head up their ass. So in February 2024, I had a meeting with some of my other NCOs, and we basically put it up to a vote. Like I don't ever make my own decisions. I always put it up to a vote for the men because, like, yeah, I'm leading it, but when it comes to like making decisions on how we're going to operate as a unit, as a whole, as our little family, I always leave it up to the men to decide. We put it to a vote if we leave the 59th, and then we take up an offer from another organization in Ukraine. It was pretty much a unanimous vote at that time to like basically say, the last 9 months was an honor, but like the deal we had is no longer the deal we had.
Right.
We're not going to put up with it anymore. And quite honestly, I made it very clear a few times out in the field. Like the positions that the 59th was meant and was told to hold were positions that held no strategic value. It held no tactical value. And it was just, it was not a decision that anyone militarily would make. It was obviously more of a political statement on, every meter at any cost. And so like the decision to leave the 59th was a unanimous one because like none of us signed up for that. We signed up for
strike operations.
Proper military lead. Yeah, like proper military operations that made sense. Wasting lives is not tactically proficient in anything. So we did what we could, but when it, when it was very, very obviously clear in February 2024 that the very upper leadership was going to waste manpower, at that point it was like, we're done. It's not worth it. So land, like Ukrainian land obviously is always worth it, but there's a point where you say, is 100 meters worth 1,000 men?
Right.
Right. Or
Exactly.
is it better to pull back, create a kill zone, and then make the Russians fight through that 100 meters? And that wasn't happening. It was basically, you need to go out on position, you need to sit there and hold that. And like at that point, it was just not, it was no longer acceptable. But so we took an offer to join another organization. I can't go into what the name of the organization is. It's part of the Ukrainian military, Ukrainian defense, to do drone operations. So then we went back to Kyiv and we spent 6 months. So some guys stayed in training. Some of us, like I went and did some operations with the organization in regards to some other stuff that I had experience doing from Iraq. But a majority of the guys went back to Kyiv and they went through like 3 months of drone school, drone training. We had to do a assessment course, and then we did a month of like training at one of their operational centers. And then our first deployment after we joined them was for drone operations back to Pokrovsk, believe it or not. Basically where we just were. But at that point, all of the area that we had fought for was basically gone. The Russians, after we left in February, the Russians in March, April, and May basically steamrolled that whole sector. They took Seladov almost without a shot. Like, they basically collapsed the front lines. And like, they got to where they were up until recently with the Pokros stuff. And honestly, that's largely just because of how much we wasted trying to hold that fucking Nevelesky and Pervomais front. If they would have pulled out sooner, we probably would see some different things as far as the eastern land goes. Like, Pokros might still be Ukrainian. Instead, we got tritted on a zero-sum fucking piece of land out in the middle of a field. But we deployed doing drone operations. I think drones was... So we had drones in the 59th Brigade, but we didn't fly them. So when we would do assault operations, we would have an ISR team for every like 4-man fire team. We had one DGI team, one bomber team, and then usually we would have FPVs. So like all of our call for fire, instead of artillery, it was like, hey, we're getting hit with machine gun fire, fly a fucking drone into it right now, or drop a bomb on it from a bomber drone. So like, we understood like from the infantry side of it, but I don't think we really understood how complex and how quick the drone warfare aspect was moving until we started doing it ourselves in 2024. Like, for the FPVs, I never worked with an FPV up until 2024. Like, actually sat there and flew. I mean, like, I flew it, but like, when it comes to like programming it and understanding like your radio frequencies and everything else, like, I was like, okay, cool, I can take off. Like, woo, you know, I never did an operation with it. So like, going through the school, the initial school we did was 4 weeks, and by the time we got out of that 4-week school, everything that they originally taught was already changed. Like, that's how quick. In 2024, drone warfare was changing like almost every week. Like, it was like your frequencies would change, your tactics in regards to how you engage the enemy would change. Like, air repeaters were showing up, new flight software that Ukrainians were creating. Like, every week there was like a new innovation. So like, it was from an infantry standpoint, it was based like, fuck, like, infantry stuff is going to be screwed. Like, you know, it's going to put a halt on everything, or it's going to make the cost extremely, extremely high.
So Ryan, as we start to like wrap up here a little bit, you've had some wild experiences in life, and you know, you're still in it over there in Ukraine. Where do you see yourself going next? You're still with this drone unit, as I understand it. What do you think is next for Ryan?
So we shut down the unit. So there was some other issues with some unit that we worked with, where we basically called it quits publicly with Chosen Company. At least as like me being a full-on commander of foreigners, due to largely what I would say is like some Ukrainian command issues, not within our organization, but like an organization that also more like a land forces, like your army type. I disagree with some of the way that they utilize manpower and still do. So we shut down Chosen Company in 2025. At the same time, we had guys who've been fighting here since 2022, like me. They wanted to move on from Ukraine for a little bit. They were burnt out due to some of the poor decisions that were made. So in 2025, we actually started up an advisory group based out of Europe to basically teach drone tactics, drone awareness, how to counter drones, and like to help show like the evolution of how drone warfare was in like 2022, 23, 24, where it's at now and where it's likely progressing. And we mainly started it up to help bolster like, not so much the American side, because like, we're never going to learn, like, and I say this all the time and it sounds terrible, but for the American drone warfare program, like we're getting there now, but for us to fully embrace and fully understand it, bodies are going to come home in boxes, just like in Iraq with the IED threat and how it took 3 years to get V bottoms. Like we don't make changes to our doctrine or recognize threats until Americans come home, sadly. And usually that's coming home, disabled or not breathing. But so we started it up mainly to teach the Europeans, saying, hey, like, your eastern border is with Russia. If you don't understand and respect what's happening here and like learn or try to engage with the Ukrainians to learn what's going on, like you're going to be fucked. Like you're fucked. Drones, like I'm a firm believer that you can still do maneuver warfare in a drone environment, but it takes a lot more planning now. There's a lot more data that your commander and like the command staff have to sort through to understand what the drone threat they're going to face is. Like there's a lot of nuances to drone warfare, and it takes a while to learn. And like what you're seeing now in the Middle East, like now they're like, oh shit, maybe we should have paid attention to like interceptors. Like not necessarily like Ukrainian interceptor technology is the greatest, but how Ukraine has integrated interceptors with radar groups, with early warning, and like the expertise on how to properly engage your Shaheeds or whatever drone, like that's what they need. Like they don't need Ukrainian technology necessarily. It's all of the experience that Ukraine has earned in blood. And like, I think now some countries are changing, but like the future for me personally, like I've lost 16 guys under my command. Sorry.
That's okay. It's been a long war, and you guys were in the thick of it.
The future for me is I'm going to stay here and fight until the end of it. I think like look, I've asked a lot for the men under my command. A lot of guys have been severely injured. There's 16 guys who died. So there's 16 families plus wives, sons, daughters who will never see their loved one again. For me to quit now, in my opinion, is dishonorable and wouldn't show the respect that those men deserve. So I guess I'm in it to win it. And then to be quite honest, I'll probably go after Russians in whatever country they're into. It'll probably be Africa. I really don't give a shit. I'm at the point in my life where I'm trying to phrase this politically correct. I'm at the point in my life, I've been here 4 years. I've seen what the Russians have done to the civilians here. I'm at the point in my life where if you're in the Russian military, you deserve nothing but death. So I'm going to follow wherever their military goes. I will support whatever group, whether it's the Tuareg rebels, the Syrian fucking government, whatever group, just to kill the fucking Russians at this point. Like I have nothing that's my motivation, honestly, at this point in life. Like what they've done here in Ukraine, what they did to the Syrians, what they're currently doing in Africa, like the Russian military and the current Russian government is a plight on humanity. So the more of them that I can either send to their deaths or back home disabled and, block the Russian geopolitical bullshit, I'm going to do it. Some people might disagree with that, but it is what it is. Like this is how I feel.
Yeah. I mean, they're just thugs and butchers. There's not anything there to admire. And I mean, there's like one part of me that I can feel a little bit for like an 18-year-old Russian conscript. It's not their fault that their government's a bunch of assholes. But at the same time, it's if you're serving that country, then I mean, you're a legitimate target. And, just like you and I were when we were in uniform.
I used to think that, but like the thing is the ones that are committing this, the ones that are in Ukraine aren't your 18-year-old conscripts.
Not anymore.
Um, Yeah, like your conscripts that got mobilized in 22, 90% of them are dead, man.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
dead or they're wounded and back in Russia. The ones that are coming to Ukraine and the ones that initially invaded Ukraine and the ones that were in Syria, they've been motivated by money, or they're motivated by this whole fucking Russian superiority,
Yeah,
fucking
Third
imperial shit.
Rome. Yeah.
And like it's not like I don't hate all Russians. Like there are good Russians, but like if you voluntarily join the Russian military at this point because it's a paycheck and you knowingly know you're going to go kill civilians and you're fine with your government flying fucking drones and missiles into schools and apartment complexes nightly, like you don't deserve any sympathy when you get fucking killed. Like I honestly hope, like all the drone videos where you see Russians getting hit, I hope it continues, and I hope we increase the death rate to like fucking 500,000, to be quite honest, a year, because like they don't deserve to live in this world. Like if you sign up to go kill people for money, it's inhumane. Like there's no, like, it's one thing to sign up to defend your country. It's another thing to sign up and say, hey, there's, even if it's something as stupid as like there's an existential threat for Ukraine being a country, I can understand that. But like when your military is signing up to make basically what amounts to blood money, like that's not a professional military. That's just a bunch of fucking thugs.
Ryan, I don't know how public your group is, but is there a place that, like, if people wanted to hire your consultancy firm for this drone stuff, a place that they could go to find you guys?
Yeah, so we do have guys that are off contract that do a lot of that. Because I am on contract, I don't really do much of that. But yeah, I can send you like an email and like our pamphlet on that too. So
okay, yeah, it's just
a lot of it's like just the very basics. Like, hey, like here's what a drone is. Like here's how to count. Like it's not, we're not teaching like civilian stuff like that. Although like, to be honest, people in general should understand what drones are, because like we haven't seen terrorist attacks yet with it, but man, like
yeah, it's coming.
It's coming. And like assassination attempts, like Trump, somebody keeps trying to kill Trump every 6 months. Luckily they fail. Whether you like the president or not, nobody should be trying to kill our president. But like the drone threat to sitting heads of state, it's there, and like it's coming quick. I think within the next year, somebody, a head of state, will be assassinated. Well, who knows where? Europe, Africa, South America, like it's coming. Somebody's going to get killed with an FPV drone or a bomber drone.
Well, Ryan, thank you for sharing your experiences with us today. And I hope, our listeners take away a lot from this about the future of warfare and how things have developed. And, you should consider writing a book at some point. This is a wild story so far. And I hope you stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, thank you again. Hopefully nobody thinks I'm too big of an asshole for that last Russian part.
No, it's natural to be angry about some of this stuff.
Yep. All right. Hey, thanks again.
Yep. Everyone else out there, we will see you again next time. Take care. Hey guys, I want to take a moment to tell you about the Team House podcast newsletter. If you go and subscribe, it's totally free. And what it will do is aggregate all of our data, all of our content that we put out, the things that are on the Team House, on our geopolitics podcast, Eyes On, things that I write journalistically with Sean Naylor on the high side, anything else that we have going on, books we recommend, upcoming guests that we have coming on the show, and also, filtering in some fun stuff in there as well. If you'll go and check it out, we send it out just once a week. We don't want to spam you guys. It's just a kind of roll up of all of our content on a weekly basis. You can find our newsletter at teamhousepodcast.kit.com/join. Again, the website for that is teamhousepodcast.kit.com/join. So we hope to see you there. The link will be down in the description.